Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 12 of the VonDubCast. Our guest today is David Akinin. David grew up in Venezuela to about 13, 14 years old. Due to the instability there, moved to America and to Florida. Really pushed himself and always wanted to learn. He ended up going to the University of Chicago, studying at Harvard. He interned at Google. He left Google to go to Wall Street. He left Wall Street to pursue his dream of moving to Africa and starting businesses there in order to bring people forward and make progress and make money while also helping people. And I just think he is really special and a really special person. He's also done a TED Talk before. He's done just so many amazing things. I don't even know where to start. And I was so lucky to get him on this podcast. And it was a very important one to me. It was the first podcast that I did with somebody that wasn't one of my friends, someone I just, asked and pestered to come on. I had never met David before. I was just really impressed by what he had done and the way he carries himself and how he problem solves and how he looks at the world is very impressive. And I thought I could learn a lot from him. So I reached out and we made it happen. And I was so blown away by just how much I learned. I don't think I've ever learned that much in such a small time period. And I'm really excited for you guys to hear about it. I'm still days and days later, weeks later, thinking of things that we discussed in this podcast are just dawning on me and hitting me in new ways. So far past the fact. So I hope that's a good sign. And I hope that means you guys will get a lot out of it. Like always, please send any feedback either through the Instagram account, the VonDubCast, or VonDubCast@gmail.com. Please, if you could, do me a favor and rate and subscribe the podcast. That really helps. And if you could, please subscribe to my Instagram. And I also made a Twitter. And I know I've been asking you guys, and kind of it's a little bit weird for me to ask you guys to subscribe to my social media when my views on social media are so negative, and I think it's such a poor thing, but it is a very important piece of the podcast. It's a broadcasting tool. It allows you to get on different guests. Everybody looks at those numbers of how many people follow it. It really helps the podcast move forward. It's not anything personal for me. If there was a way I could go about this without touching social media at all, I really would. But I'm going to try and, keep it positive and try not to fall into many of the pitfalls about social media that I've discussed on this podcast. I just started a Twitter, and I would love if you guys could go and follow my Twitter on it. I'm going to use that to follow any podcasts that I listen to and any members that really impact my life, so that as I talk to them on the podcast, if you want to learn more, you can go there and kind of find at least a little bit of access to them. And then I'm also going to be kind of retweeting and sharing some stuff, maybe putting some more of my thoughts out in that medium. Like I said, I know Twitter is the biggest dumpster fire I've ever seen, and everyone's just completely negative. But if you use it the right way, there's a lot of knowledge out there too, and I think I can hopefully show a pathway forward for people to use Twitter in a healthy way. I think Instagram is a lot more healthy. There's still a lot of pitfalls you can fall into. But yeah, that's kind of the reason behind it. And I know it's kind of funny for me to ask of that, but it is really important to where I want to bring this podcast to get a little bit of a following on Instagram and Twitter. So if you guys could just do me that favor, I would really appreciate that. That's what's going to help me move this podcast forward. And so sit back, relax, and I really hope you enjoyed this podcast. I enjoyed recording this with David so immensely, and I've gotten so much out of it, and I'm really proud of this one. I'm really proud of stepping out of my comfort zone and being able to sit down with someone I've never met before and have such a good conversation. I hope that shows people going forward that I'm not just somebody that can, podcast with my friends. I can do this, and it's something I had to prove to myself, and I'm really happy I have. So this is kind of that first podcast that I want people to hear, and I want people to pass on to their friends. So if you do hear it and you connect and you think you might know somebody else that would really enjoy listening to this, please try and pass this one on. And really hope you guys enjoy. Welcome, David.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm glad we made this happen.
Yes, I was so excited right from the first time I ever got to hear you speak on what was your friend's podcast? The name of the podcast there. She does weightlifting, powerlifting from Venezuela. Do you know what the name of her podcast was? Anyways, I heard you on there, and I was blown away. It was actually one of my friends.
Steffi Cohen.
Yeah, Steffi Cohen. And one of my friends had heard you on it and had actually reached out to you before I had. And she just kind of mentioned it in passing. Oh, I think he'd be good for your podcast if you want to listen to it. And I listened to it, and I just went down a rabbit hole. I listened to that podcast, and I listened to your TED talk. I got on your blog, I read your blog, and I took some of your recommendations and followed them through. And just at every point, I found that a lot of the things that you were proposing and a lot of things that it seemed like you followed in your life really directly impact how I live my life. And it was just very cool to see someone living a very different and separate path than mine, but also how much they did line up at different points. And I will have already given a little background in the intro of all the many things you've done. And one of the biggest things that I saw in doing that research was just how hard it was to keep track of the time. And you do so many things in so many interesting places, I couldn't even put it together. So I do want to maybe start from the beginning, from where you grew up and how you got there. But first, I think a big piece of it is those three tenets that you talked about in your TED Talk. And I recommend anybody just stop this podcast right now and go listen, type in David Akinin TED Talk and listen to that first. I think that'd be a very good first step to understanding kind of where I want to take this this conversation a little bit in throughout all the other stuff. And maybe you could just give us a little taste of those three core tenets or pillars or whatever have you, what you name them, and that will maybe dictate some of the other things that go with the conversation.
Yeah, I think more than the three tenets, because I know in the TED Talk I said there's three tenets, and then I not only gave three, but then I started talking about redrawing your plan, and then I made it like six or seven things that came out of it. That was one of the feedbacks a good friend of mine gave me once. But I think that the core that I wanted to get at is that accountability can be a tool for managing our lives, for managing our goals, our dreams, for managing our relationships. And you know, the main thing I tried to convey on that talk was that sometimes we have these dreams. Some of them seem attainable, some of them seem so far out. And then if we tell ourselves we want to do it, that's not enough, because we haven't really put ourselves any responsibility towards actually executing on our dreams. You know, when you have a test in school and you have to pass that test in order to go to the next year, in order to graduate, you have such responsibility to go study at night because you know there's a deadline, because you know you need to submit, you need to show up, you need to write in, and you need to get a good grade. When you say, I want to send shoes to Africa, or I want to build a house, or you say, I want to go volunteer at old people's homes, and you say it only to yourself, human nature is to just inspire yourself by telling yourself ideas, but it's not really to like get them done. And I think for me, I mean, one of the main things that I think I realized in my time in high school was that I proposed doing a project with a friend, but we didn't just say it to each other. We built a website around it. We announced it to our parents, which is a big deal because now they're feeling you. We announced it to our friends, and we went out there and started telling people we want to get this done. And in our example, we wanted to ship shoes to Africa. So we made a website called shoesforafrica.org. We collected shoes from all around the country. I was president of the student government at the time at my school, and I convinced the principal that if any student who brought 2 pairs of shoes would get 1 hour of community service on the record. And in order to graduate from our high school, you needed 1 hour of community service. So most people were like, oh, is this an official way to do it? Here you go, 2 pairs of shoes. So before I knew it, I had about 6,000 pairs of shoes between my friend and I had collected. People from California were shipping us boxes with shoes inside. And now my parents were asking me, hey, when are these shoes going to go to Africa? My friends were asking, how are you going to get these shoes to Africa? I'm like, you can't back out. This is not an idea anymore. You've told everyone you're going to do this. You started executing with it. You put yourself on the spot. And now you're like, crap, I need to figure this out. And that's when you get into execution mode. That's when your blood starts flowing in ways you don't feel it in the mornings. That's when you start thinking, oh, crap, I got to get this done. I mean, you invited me on this podcast. If you don't send me a link and you don't show up on the other side with your headphones and you can hear me and I can hear you, I'm going to be disappointed because I've made time to be here today and speak with you. 100%. So you made yourself accountable.
Yes, 100%.
And that's for me amazing.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the biggest things I saw is that accountability, and that was something that I had to really overcome in doing this podcast. What I told you before we started was the nice mic setup and stuff. That was a piece of that accountability to myself of, okay, I'm going to put some financial impact in this for myself. And I also did exactly what you did. I took a couple key people in my life, not a ton of people, maybe 5 or 6, and told them I'm starting this podcast and gave them, and now it was accountable to me. And just so we can kind of move on, the other 2 tenets that were in the TED Talk, and like you say, and I think they kind of run from the accountability is to generate answers and to set goals. And to me, those are two pieces of being accountable. If you want to be accountable, you can't sit back and wait for people to bring you information, or for what I see a lot in the workforce is people, they know how to do their role. They can walk their day forward. And when they run into a problem, their first solution is to send an email to ask somebody that they think can answer this question. And then they just wait, and they sit and they wait. And for the most part, not even a follow-up phone call, not anything. And I loved what you were talking about of generating answers. Don't wait for the answers to come to you. That is just it's an excuse. It's an excuse for resistance to work its way in and get in between you and your goals. And I think that, and having set goals with no stops and no excuses, I think it's so easy, and it's human nature almost to find the easy way outs. And if you don't set those goals and keep yourself accountable to having no stops or excuses along the way, you're not going to get there, or you're going to get there 2 years later than you wanted to of the path of where you wanted to get. And now you're behind the eight ball already because you could have done it in a more efficient way. And I love the way that those go. And one of the things that I really like to hear was when you talk about Choose for Africa, which is probably your first biggest foray into a big project from the way I understand it and the timeline as I hold it. And you were saying that you didn't actually know how you were going to ship all those shoes when you started it. And that is just the biggest piece of entrepreneurial leaps of faith that I feel like we're not encouraging enough. And another piece that you said is you think it's more important to ask kids about their goals and their dreams than their grades. And I think that is such a huge piece, and that we are doing ourselves a disservice and not fully utilizing the human capital within society by not forcing those ones out. You're going to have the fallback plan of just the basic path, go to school, go to university, get a job, and you can follow that forward. That doesn't go away by telling people to chase their dreams. But now you open it up so you can take these other paths and know that they're available to you to actually bring forward, and you could make some real change and start your own company or find a way to pursue something you love and make money with it. And I just think that is something that is so lost and really needs to be fostered and pushed again in society so that we have more dreamers and more people jumping up.
Nick, I'll tell you something, man. I mean, what you're describing there in the last point has become so vivid and so imperative for me in my work every day. Today, I mean, we can go back and forth around like the interview, but today I run a construction company in Namibia. We run a food distribution thing. We run mortgages and digitalization company. One of the first questions I ask anyone that I interview, and one of the first questions I ask when I'm in the car for 2 hours with one of our plumbers or an electrician, or if I'm giving a ride to the architect. I mean, we deal with over 150 employees directly in any of our ventures.
Wow.
The first question I always ask, if not the second or third, is, what did you want to be when you were like 6 or 7? And I don't ask it as like, I really don't ask it as a interview question, like, I'm reading this out loud. I bring it into the conversation. So I find a way to kind of bring up this idea that I wanted to know what you wanted to be when you were younger. Mm-hmm. And the amount of times people stutter, it's like, I don't need you to guess. That needs to be part of your story. That needs to be part of your core. That needs to be you on a daily basis. Even if it was your old dream that you gave up, there needs to be a story that catches you on. And
you need to know your why.
And I'm gonna share with you a story about that actually is quite interesting, because it drives the point that you were making about how we're not doing this enough. Mm-hmm. We built a clinic for a Himba village in the northwest of Namibia. It was funded by an NGO. We do a lot of work with NGOs. And this was a place where there wasn't any health facilities, maybe 4 hours nearby. So a clinic was important. Kids were dying, adults were dying from random things.
Wow.
And when we built this clinic, there was no petrol stations nearby, no stores, no electricity, no water. We actually had to drill a borehole to take water out. We had to set up a solar system to put electricity there. So you can imagine the rurality of this project. Now, here I am in an office, like you can see the office setting, like there's a beautiful area outside, we have the finance managers and whatnot. So I'm in a city. I'm in the capital of a city in Africa. But when we built this project, we were in mountains, man. So I ended up spending 10 days, 4 days, 6 days camping out. And this was about 2017, about 3 years into my time in Namibia, maybe almost 4. Yeah. And look at this, man. Like, here goes a guy who spends most of his time in cities, in his car, in an airplane, moving around between construction sites, hiring people, firing people, buying materials, to now spending time in a tent without cell phone signal, no electricity, no water, and 10 of my guys or 15 of my guys. Some of them new, some of them been with me for quite a while. In the evening, what do you do? I mean, even if you're the boss, it doesn't matter. Like I believe in this concept. I studied at the University of Chicago. I believe in this concept of like servant leadership, which was something they taught us in a leadership program there, which means as a boss, you're not the top gun and everyone's below you, but it's kind of like the boss is there to serve the employees, not the other way around. So it's this concept for me of like, I'm just here to make your job happen. So if you've been hired as a plumber, my job is to make sure that you have all the tools you need, to make sure you have all the materials you need and the relationships you need within this company to get your plumbing work done. My job is not to tell you what to do. That's your job. You figure out what to do here. If I talk to other people, my job is to make sure you have everything you need. So here I am 10 days, maybe in a mountain, trying to design this project. How are we building the clinic, the nurses? Where are they going to live? Let's build their home. Where are we going to get the sand and stone in order to mix it to make concrete? Like we need to dig for sand, like all this stuff. At night, we would spend time in a fireplace. And it was the first time in 3 years of my work. And I challenge you to think about this in your own work, that I actually spent time with my employees. Like quality time, man. I'm not talking about like relaxing over beers on the weekend. I'm talking about we were so disconnected, and this is why companies probably do leadership seminars. We were so disconnected that we had a chance to really break in. And I found out no one that worked with me wanted to be a builder. None of the plumbers wanted to be plumbers. None of the electricians wanted to be electricians. Never in their lives. They ended up in those positions. One guy wanted to be a mechanic. Another guy wanted to fly planes. One guy wanted to be a ballerina. Doesn't matter. They all had different dreams. And that was in early May 2017. Africa Day is celebrated on May 21st. Or that year, I remember it because I put it on the letter. And I wrote a letter to every employee in our company, even subcontractors. 1-page letter, and we can share it at some point. I can show it to you. And it was this letter where I said, it's Africa Day. Take the day off. You know, it's celebrated in Africa. And I want to learn more about you. And I explained what the exercise was. It was actually not mandatory so that nobody would feel like they had to. And I gave them a questionnaire. The questionnaire was about 6 pages, but it was very, like 1 page was one full question. So in the first page, I asked them, what's your name? What's your phone number? Where do you live? Where were you born? What's your dad's first name? Your mom's first name? How old are you now? Even though I asked you your birthday, I said, how old are you now? Write in the age. How old will you be in 1 year? Write in the age. How old will you be in 5 years? And how old will you be in 10 years? So right now I'm 30 years old. So I was asking them, in a year you should be 31, then you're 35, and in 5 years, in 10 years you're 40. Like this would be my answers. Then I said, tell me about your dream when you were 7 years old. What did you want to be? The next question was, after that, what happened to your dream? That's it. I didn't say anything else. And I left lines empty. I mean, these are people, some of them didn't graduate high school, grew up in apartheid Namibia. I mean, like I had a big range of people working here. I had foreigners working in the company. Interestingly, the foreigners also struggled with the exercise.
And I think this is everywhere.
And then I said, after this dream story and what happened to your dream, I didn't want to influence these questions with any previous substance questions. Then I went to the first substance question, which was, tell me about your education. Where did you study? Up to when? What schools? What were the names? Where was it? I wanted to know how often these people moved schools and what actually happened. Did they graduate? Did they not graduate? Then I said, tell me, what is your job in our company? What's your title? You'd be surprised how many people I didn't know their title was what they claim it is, even though I hired them. So how many people are saying I'm a plumber and I thought they are maybe a builder, but they think their job is to be a plumber? So there's a discrepancy between management and execution where I'm like, why do you think your job is A if I hired you for B? That's interesting. Then I asked, tell me, what do you like most about your job? And then I asked, tell me something about your job that you would change or that you're not so happy about. interesting, plumbers, and I keep bringing the example. I haven't told you yet what people wanted to do as their dream. I'm kind of telling you that's the biggest takeaway. But plumbers, for example, in this question, they said that even though we're building new homes or new clinics or new schools, working in sewage was embarrassing for them because people think it's dirty because you're touching, excrement.
Right.
But they don't see that it's new sewage. So you're actually digging new pipelines and you're going into new manholes in the most cases and for our jobs. And they said that actually was embarrassing for them. Fast forward, we were able to identify that plumbers were taking 7 days to do the sewage for a house because they would slowly try to avoid it. So I said, what? Then I took everyone in the construction sites and then I had plumbing day where everyone had to see what sewage meant. That made the sewerage department finish their jobs in 1 day instead of 7 days,
Wow.
But anyway, then I asked them the interesting thing, which was, next page was, where do you see yourself in 1 year? And then it said, enter your age a year from now. So in my case, I would have written 31. And then there was 3 buckets: in your personal life, your career, and family. And just blank. There's no lines. Just tell me. I didn't even expect you to write 7 lines. I just left a blank space for family, a blank space for personal, a blank space for career. Then I asked, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And then I asked, where do you see yourself in 10 years? Brother, before I answer what they said in these 3 pages, let me take you back to the first question. What was your dream when you were 7? And what the heck happened to your dream? What do you think? And now you can ask me questions to try to get to the answer, but what do you think? More than 90% of the people told me their dream was. It was the same answer. I actually thought people copied. And I was worried. So
would it be? I don't know.
I want to answer this. Give me a few options of what you think it could have been. We're in Africa. People are plumbers, electricians, builders. They are. There's an architect, there's a site manager, there's a civil engineer, there's a few of the higher level jobs. So I don't know exactly. There's a sales team, there's an operations team, an accounting team. Everyone answered it. More than 90% came back with the same answer.
Was the answer to be happy?
That's interesting. We can use that in the, where do you see yourself? That's amazing you brought that up, because I was shocked to see that as when I asked people, where do you see yourself in a year? They just wrote happy.
Oh,
there wasn't substance to the dream going forward in detail for personal, family, and career.
Right.
Like, actually, if I can find a pile of paper, you would see that most people just wrote happy, 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 happy.
Yeah.
And that's such a simple dream.
Exactly.
But interesting, bring you back, because a lot of people did call me for when they were filling it out, and they said, I want to know, what do you mean by this question? I said, no, what do you see yourself doing? What was your dream of what you see yourself doing? So more like a career job.
I'm going to guess doctor then, for my own reasons. I feel like that would be the next best guess that I could throw out. Everyone would be a doctor.
So why would you say doctor?
I feel like it's just, I think that's a reflection of my own upbringing and Western culture and what we value, and try and put it across to people I don't know much about. So I think that's probably where I get to that answer. And I think also I'm... the way I grew up and my only relation to African culture in person, other than what you see on TV, was pretty much nothing all of my childhood, because I grew up in a very northern community in Alberta, which is the oil and gas sector of Canada, and there wasn't a lot of African culture around. So when I went to university, just what I got to see, it seemed like everyone I met that had African culture really ingrained in them, it seemed like that was the predominant thing over there too. So that always stuck with me of, it's the same everywhere, doctor is kind of a universal thing. I think that's probably where I went to that, and just how many spectacular people were at the University of Alberta where I was going, pursuing a dream of becoming a doctor, that had come from Nigeria, or I don't know if I ever met anyone from Namibia, maybe I did, but all these places, and doctor was on a lot of their lists as very high. So I think that'd probably where I
Interesting. Doctor was not the answer, but the thought process you're giving me is exactly how to get to the answer. Because some people did say doctor, and it is for the same reason that I'm going to explain now why more than 90% of people said they wanted to be teachers.
Wow.
Now, in your upbringing, you just said something that's key. in your upbringing, you said that that's what you saw as the thing to be.
That's what you're
in
told.
their
If you want to
upbringing,
be a doctor or a lawyer. Yeah.
In their upbringing, notice that we were building a clinic in a place where 4 hours nearby, there wasn't any health services. So doctors were very hard to find. It was very hard to aspire to be something you couldn't see. Now, what there was, the church doesn't really bring doctors to the villages, but the church, missionaries, and other people that were coming even during apartheid, during colonial times, and after independence, definitely made sure that kids at the youngest age possible would be educated in some way, one or another. Now, I was shocked. I didn't expect teachers to be the answer. I expected it to be 10% doctors, 10% engineers, 10% the president, 10% house mom, whatever. Give me answers. So I had women and men in this company. Right. Now, I called people and I said, why are you? So I actually ended up interviewing everyone, and we sat down one-on-one and reviewing their dreams. Because I said, it could take me a couple months, but who cares? Heck, let's go sit one by one. This week I'll do 12 people. Next week I'll do 20. And eventually I'll get through everyone. And the main question I had for people is, tell me more about this thing that you wanted to be a teacher. And here's a summary. It was people saying to me, listen, man, I grew up in a single mom home, which is unfortunately not a tragedy because you can see it from many angles, but it is sad that so many homes are supported by one adult, and that's a reality that many African kids live in, at least in Namibia today. Marriage is not necessarily always a common thing. A man can have a wife and then move to another area. So kids also grow up very often with their grandmothers in a village, and the mom goes to work somewhere in a city. And then the role model was this teacher who was nicely dressed every day, looking good, smiling, asking you questions about how you are, paying attention to your well-being, asking you questions about trying to teach you and impart knowledge in you. And remember, most of these people were growing up in villages that didn't have TVs and didn't have internet and didn't have the best toys. They just had a village with a few animals and a house and people who were quiet and maybe nobody that dressed nice and beautiful every day who was paid to be there. So it was amazing that, and I try to spread this message to teachers to tell them, you're changing the world. As a teacher, you're changing the world more than anyone you can imagine, because every day you stand in front of many children who have their own context, that are coming from a home that maybe there was no food, no love, no happiness, no wealth. Who knows what there wasn't. I'm not saying everyone is like that, but in the case that they come to you, you have the opportunity to change their mindset about what they're going through. And it's incredible because we started this whole conversation now about what you were saying, which was we don't push and ask enough, what did people want to be? And then the other question, which was, what happened to that dream? That's when, if we studied it enough, we could understand how to try to change society a little bit. Because people tell me I didn't have enough money to pursue a career in education. So I ended up being a builder because it was easy and you didn't have to study. I didn't have enough money to go through a good high school. I didn't have good grades. I didn't have good teachers in order to learn enough to be able to graduate. So I had to drop out. And, if we ask those two questions, what are your dreams and what happened to your dreams? Really, that's the substance of a lot of the stuff that is happening in our society today.
100%. And I love that story. And you're so right. It did touch on so many things. And I wonder if I can just have a minute to tell you a story, because I think it's funny how closely that story lines up with exactly my story and then the story of this podcast too, because I feel like one of the goals of this podcast for myself is almost the exact same thing you just did, just in a very different way, but with the same spirit behind it. So I love that idea of you're talking about sitting down with your crews that first night around the campfire when you're building that medical center, and you finally get to have that connection that you don't get with people. These days, I feel like that connection is broken down in multiple ways. Either it's just a time constraint, it's everybody's busy with their own lives, or even when you do have time to have a conversation with someone, you always have that phone in your hand or something where you're getting distracted, emails are coming in. You don't ever sit down and get down to those levels because you never talk about those dreams, because you're just almost the circumstances surrounding it don't set you up to get to those conversations anymore. And I thought that was an issue. And I loved hearing when I would listen to long form podcasts, especially the ones that were, 2 hours, 3 hours long, you would get to hear that. And sitting in on a conversation like that, it almost feels like you're a piece of that. And I think you get that feeling of, oh, I didn't know I was missing this. Right. And I think it opens you up and allows you to be a lot more vulnerable. And you can get to these places that in a 20-minute TV show or even an hour and a half long movie with all these characters, you can never get to it. Even if it is based on reality, you can pull pieces of the humanity out that you don't get to in even one or multiple long form conversations, right? And I saw the same issue as you, is this disconnect between people that want to chase their dreams and want to be happy and being forced through whatever circumstances you talk about, that whatever happened to that dream in between then and now, that has brought them to this place. And I thought, well, what's the best way to explore it? What's the best way to get people to get to that vulnerable place? And I thought, well, a podcast could be that. And I think that is what I see. I see people around me that are either doing it already and chasing their dream, and I want to have them on and talk to them and say, how did you do it? To show people that are listening the steps in long forms. You have you have the full time to elaborate every step of the way, what steps you took, what you were feeling at the time, how scary it was, that you had thoughts of failure, you thought you were in over your head, right? Those kind of things. And then also to have on a mix of people that maybe aren't chasing their dreams yet, but I can see that spark inside them, that if they were to, they could take it really far. Because I think that's a lot. Everybody has dreams. You're not going to find someone that doesn't have some of these, when you ask them what they want to be when they're older, that, said nothing. Everybody has dreams. You just have to get down and allow them the space and the freedom and the vulnerability to elaborate on them.
I do find people, by the way, and it could be me going on a date and asking, I mean, this is not my thing. It's not like I ask everyone, what do you want to be when you were 7? But there's no way, and I'm coming at you. I want to know what you want to be when you were 7. But I'm saying there's no way I'll establish a relationship with someone, whether it's romantic, friendship, colleague-wise, professional service provider, whatever it is. And eventually I have your phone number, I have your email, we've had 20 discussions. There's no way 20 of these discussions have gone by and you and I don't know what we wanted to be when we were younger. And what's our substance? What are we all about? Otherwise, we're perfect strangers, And,
exactly.
But you will be surprised, man, Nick, how many people I've asked that actually tell me I don't know.
Yeah.
And I don't know what I wanted to be. Not what you want to be now. Because if I ask you what you want to be now, we all struggle because we have this thing where we're like, the present is so difficult. But if you look back at the present 2 months from now, that was not so difficult as the new present. So it's easier in retrospect to always consider your life. And when I ask people what you want to be when you were 7, a lot of them say, I don't know. And then I say, call your parents, man, find out. And the parents say they don't know. That's when it kills me, because how can your parents who were with you for 3-4 years of that developmental age tell you that we really don't know what you were thinking about? So it's important. It really is.
So something that just occurred to me, and I'm just speaking, just occurred to me as I said, so maybe you can help me explore this thought. But I think maybe a piece of that is, as a child, you have a lot more people to look up to just by the basis of who you are and how much knowledge you have. You have to look up to people. You're dependent on people. So you have people you look up to. You have mentors that mean a lot to you. And I think a lot of times, like you spoke about, those mentors for lots of your employees, it was the teachers, right? That person that came in. And I think for a lot of people in Western society or anywhere in the world, just if you do have that 2-parent household, all those things are good. A lot of the times it's your parents. For myself, I didn't know what I wanted to be a lawyer. But really what I was trying to say, I think I wanted to be like my dad. I wanted to be a businessman. I just didn't at the time, I couldn't articulate that. And as I grew up, I realized that that was kind of what I wanted to do. And I wanted to help solve problems. I wanted to, just be in some sort of business at a high level. So I had the freedom to do what I wanted when I wanted, but I could also make good money from it, provide people with good jobs. That was kind of what I saw. And I think that was, for me, seeing my mentor and my role model and then modeling myself after that. I think every year you get older, it's harder. You have to, it's a vulnerable thing to say who you look up to and ascribe things that you want in your life to other people and where you got them from. For some reason, looking inside yourself and trying to do that deep work of where these things inside you come from is a scary process to a lot of people. And I think what I saw was, I wanted to be this businessman. That was kind of my goal growing up. And then I went to university. I got a business degree, all in pursuit of this. Yeah. I got a job, kind of really, for if you could go up to a 6 or 7-year-old me and say, your dream, this is I've accomplished exactly what that dream is. But by the time I accomplished it, that had changed. I had different
amazing
mentors. And what I noticed David, was my mentors were these podcast hosts that I was listening to, these long form that would have these emotional, vulnerable, weren't scared to cry, weren't scared to speak of where they were coming from, weren't scared of the backlash of what they were saying. And I thought that was so momentous to me. And I got to this point where I was doing this business, and I love business, and I still do, right? It was still a part of me. I grew up all those years being that my main goal. And it's not that I don't love it, but I was missing out a piece. I had this whole new avenue that I looked up to that I wanted to incorporate, which is this podcasting world and this long form medium that I really think is something special. And it just occurred to me one day that I was extremely unhappy just with what was going on, even though I was being extremely successful. And I thought to myself, I have to make a change. I need to pursue it. If this is that important to me, I have to pursue it, whatever comes with it. And it needed those account, like you talked about, until I, bought the equipment. It wasn't even buying the equipment. I shouldn't use that as an example because that was a byproduct. It was when, like you say, the first time I told people that I was going to do it and made that account was myself, right? Personally, like it was my sister, my girlfriend, a couple people. I don't even think I told my parents, but I started, and I did that. And then I started diving into the work. That's the other piece of it. I created spreadsheets of all these dream guests I had, avenues to get into, I'm really into esports and MMA and hockey and all these different, okay, what are avenues I could find smaller guests in those avenues to work my way up to bigger guests in those. And I started really diving into it. And that was when and all these things of realizing the mentorship, and that didn't occur to me that I think that was the big shift that had taken from my mentor of following my dad and what he was going to, of what I was seeing in him and what I wanted to see in myself, to someone like a Joe Rogan, like a Lex Friedman, like an Eric or Brett Weinstein, like a Pete Holmes, right? All these comedians that's the other thing. It wasn't just these really intellectual guys that I really connected with, but it was also the comedians that were doing it. And it showed me that whether it was intellectual, whether it was comedy, whether it was the medium of a long form, vulnerable podcast that has that room for what's missing in society, of that freedom. If I mess up, if I said something to you that maybe isn't 100% the right, you wouldn't jump down my throat like you would maybe on Twitter. You compassionately, hey, you're saying, but that's all that people communicate these days on these short form, these Twitter, and they're so taught that the way your basic response should be an attack. It should be to joke. But when you're having a long form conversation where you're showing a little vulnerability, that's never your first instinct. Your first instinct, okay, I see where you're going with that, but maybe you're missing this piece, and maybe if you saw it from this way, and you can influence their decision. And I think there's a real need in the world for a push towards this long form and what the basis of these long form. And I think later in the conversation, we'll probably get into it. I think there's some other ways that I think a lot of these core tenets that are being refound in long form conversation and vulnerability are core tenets, I think, that were in religion for a long time. This love, compassion, turn the other cheek, love thy neighbor, give them that benefit. It all comes down to really benefit of the doubt, if you wanted to modernize it into a term. But that is all lost. And I think people for so long, and myself, and this is, I'm speaking about people, but just myself, I definitely went through this myself, where I grew up a little bit religious, fell off of it, and completely went on a mindset where anything to do with religion was bad and it was silly and you're an idiot if you think that way. And then I had another switch where I started to see the positive aspects, and I wasn't fully realizing all the viewpoints that you could take with the religion. There are a lot of good things. There's a reason it was with us for so many thousands of years, and there's things. And I think that realization, now that I woke up to it, I see it in everybody else of their anything that can come close to religion, whether it's love or compassion, it's all taboo for whatever reason. And society has gotten to that point. It's all taboo to me, or it's as it seems. And I think that is a dangerous game to be playing, where you take these core tenets that are. Go ahead.
But I'm saying you're globalizing your podcast, so I wanna just intervene there and say, maybe not everywhere.
Right.
I still find religion in villages of Namibia driving the core of the humanity of the people. I still feel that you can walk into someone and say, I'll give you an example, actually, and it's about the power of religion today, still in the lower income parts of the world, which is guiding. There is a negative part to it, and I'll identify. I want to talk about the positive, but I'll highlight the negative before I go, so that no one ever thinks that there's a one-sided view to things. Religion has taken advantage of the most vulnerable communities also today, to actually go in and make them donate part of their income in a way that is not sustainable for them when they don't make enough. And I'm not saying that's religion. That's the people who are taking advantage of religion. To go 100%. In there and use that in order to not only tarnish the name of religion, right? But to actually take advantage of population. So putting that aside, which has to be highlighted because I've seen it in Nigeria, I've seen it in Namibia,
100%.
I've seen it in many places, right? You see a
America.
preacher, maybe in America, I haven't seen it physically, but you see a preacher walking around in the best suit, in the most expensive car you can buy, but his people are extremely, extremely poor. And you wonder, is this preacher really at the core of what this community needs or not? And that's for God to question, or his own community to question, not for me. But what I wanted to highlight, when you're bringing a point now that maybe we're stepping away from some of the core tenets of religion that have kind of helped society get to where it is today. And it might be dangerous in the sense that if we walk away from it too much, what is actually holding and piecing together what makes us up as a society? The camaraderie, the kindness that drives our businesses, the kindness that drives our schools and all of that. And I'll tell you, I had a guy who we hired, and he hit a woman on site. He was a site supervisor, and he hit a civil engineer who was working for us. She was a woman. She corrected him on site. So he slapped her. I wasn't there. And I didn't hear about it until a week later because another employee ratted him out. She didn't come to me and say, hey, David, or Mr. David, or whatever she wanted to call me. I've got this problem on site. A guy hit me. Do something about it. She thought that was okay. Now, I don't think it's okay in any context. It doesn't matter what your tradition or your culture is. You don't hit a woman, and you don't even offend a woman on my site, especially when she's more senior to you. You can't be offended by her correction, you know? Not that that justifies anything. So I went to him and I told him he's fired. Straight up. No, there's no conversation. You're not going to time out. There's no time out when you hit when you're violent. So he takes me to labor court. Okay.
Wow.
And we go to, Namibia is super efficient, man. So we go to labor court and I show up. This was my first year on site. I went from being an investment banker in New York in a suit to moving to Namibia. My first year, like putting some cheap Timberland knockoffs, you know, like different brand jeans and a shirt. And I went out there to figure out how to mix concrete, you know? And here I am in labor court, which I didn't even know what it was. I actually went excited because I'm like, I'm going to fight labor court. You know, like this is exciting. Like, this is an amazing experience. Like, I don't see it as a negative thing. There's somebody's like, you got to hire a lawyer. I'm like, no, I'm going to labor court and I'm going to represent myself and I'm going to find out what this is all about. Turns out labor court is not a court. It's some lady's office in some old office in the center of this town, which is a tiny town in the middle of the country. And I walk in and this lady's like, hey, what is your problem now? This guy's saying you did not pay him. Sit down, what? So we sit down. I'm like, what do you mean I didn't pay him? So you haven't paid his salary for 6 months. I said, is that why I'm being taken to labor court? I haven't paid his salary for 6 months. She said, yeah, you haven't. I said, man, I fired this guy because he hit a woman. This is what I thought he's coming here to sue me or argue against me for maybe being unfair treatment or unfair firing, whatever you want to call this thing. And I was happy to fight it. But now you're telling me that the reason I'm here is because I haven't paid this guy in 6 months. She said, yeah, you haven't paid him. You need to pay him now. Then you guys can go. I said, is this an arbitrage? Because I don't know what the rules are. Let's define them. You know, what do you mean I have to pay this guy? We've paid him. Now, look, man, if you didn't pay my salary for 6 months, you know, you're not going to hear about me in 6 months. You're going to hear about me in month 1 plus day 1, right? Like 30 days plus 1. So I told the lady, do you know this man from before today? I mean, you're the labor court here, right? So has he shown up here before in the past 6 months? No. I said, so even 6 months, I didn't pay him. Why would he come only now to tell you that I didn't pay him? So she said, no, I don't know. I'm here to defend you guys. You know, come on, tell me what's happening. So the guy says that I didn't pay him. So I actually carry my briefcase. I open my briefcase and I actually find 2 proof of payments in my briefcase from random months in the past. That he signed from having received. He physically signed the receipt of payment. So I showed, look, he got paid this month and he got paid this month. And she says, hey, there's proof that you were paid at least 2 of the 6 months. Now I'm out for 4, hey? And the guy says, that's not my signature. And I was like, okay, now you got me, bro, because I said, what do you mean? He said, no, you falsified my signature. You signed for me. I said, really? Give me your ID. So he gives me his ID. The back of your ID, your signature's there, man. I said, look, lady, his signature. Yeah, this guy is so smart. He went to university. He knows how to falsify perfectly the signature. I said, what? Now the lady's like, you falsify his signature, you gotta pay him. I'm like, no. Time out.
Time out.
24. I was 24 years old, man. I'm already like out of ideas, you know. Like I've never seen this shit before. I've never gone through this stuff before. So I said, look, swear. Now I must say I am Jewish, and I took a chance on this. So I'm not of the Christian or Catholic faith, but I do understand that the people around me go to church. So I told the guy, swear on Jesus Christ's name that that is not your signature and that you did not sign it. Look, this guy is rough.
Yeah.
He hit a woman on sight. He took me to labor court. He's fighting me, and he's come up with every excuse in the book to say that I haven't paid him.
Yeah.
He said, I will not do that.
There you go.
I said, you will not swear on Jesus Christ. I said, lady, this guy doesn't want to swear on Jesus Christ, and I haven't paid him for 6 months. Then I'm on Jesus' name because it's his faith. If you cannot put that on verb, means I've paid you. And the guy almost started crying, man. I swear to you. And the case was over on the spot. The lady took the name of Jesus and him not willing to say it and said, if you don't say it, say it. And it all came down to this core tenet of religion of I will not break my vows with God in his mind. Yes. Where he was willing to lie, hid, rob, threaten, and do whatever he wanted. But when I brought that up, when I brought something that was still instilled in him from an early life, that superseded every other bad intention he had. And he was unwilling because his conscience and his morality didn't allow him to break that covenant that he has with his God and his way of believing. And, you know, I don't use this often. I don't walk around making people swear on Jesus Christ. And I'm sure most people wouldn't even do it. Most people wouldn't even care, and they would swear on it because they're lying anyway. But it was such a weird experience and refreshing in a way that you could still call on religion, that you could still call on a person's morality to make them, I don't know. It just highlighted to me now that you were talking about like it's missing. It's to show you that even though it's missing, it still guides some people's hearts in the world.
And I think in some of my theories, because there are just theories right now about that being one of the big core tenets to some of the problems we're seeing is that loss. I was curious to ask you, that was one of the questions I was going to ask you later, is do you, once I was confident you understood where I was getting at with that, I was going to ask you if you do see a difference between some of these some countries, because of how well traveled you are, the countries that do have a strong faith base, if you see any differences in that. But also where I was kind of going with that is I think you nailed it right on the head when you were saying that they can't, the problem is the separation of the religion itself and the people enacting the religion, right? You see that all over the place. And I think that is what got us to this point of, and myself too, is how can I back up a religion that does things you've seen in the Catholic faith? If we're just going to bring it back to the Western world where I've been operating, you know, you see, look at the Catholic Church and some of the things that they've done, and you just say you can't support that in any way. And by saying that, you are not separating the people from the faith. And I think that is what we're dealing with so much nowadays, is you can't separate anything from anything now, because it's all just bad idea, bad person, you know, bad thought, bad person. But it's not, it's, if you have that room to give them a little room to grow, it's not, a lot of times it's not actual hate. It's invented, that all they need is a handout to help bring them into a more nuanced viewpoint. And what worries me more than anything, I think, is to see that, yes, we've very clearly lost some of these religious tenets, but you see it being picked up. But because people don't realize what they've lost, they pick it up anywhere, and they don't put the real. You should have a lot of those core tenets that you like you say. It should be very important to you. It should mean something to you. But then you just see people picking up whatever shouted to them on the street as their core tenets, and now we have people treating wokeness as a religion and all these other things that are pseudo religions to them, right? As soon as you let it take hold in you to that degree, it becomes your religion. But you have to be very careful what what something so basic to who you are comes from. You need to be very sure that is rooted in things that you value, like love and compassion, those things that most religions that have all their issues, like we talked about and already said, but they are for the most part based in some sort of love, compassionate love for people around you and wanting to be better. And I think when you start getting things that don't have that and are based on, I think a lot of the time you see it based on greed and based on money these days. That is the core tenet behind a lot of things, just with how things are set up. That becomes, when people take that on, that becomes their new compass inside of them, and that's where we see all these dominoes falling down the way of these other causes that can all be, if you really wanted to take a high level view, it can all be traced back to that. And I was wondering,
when do you think? But when do you think people actually build this toolbox inside of them? Because what you're describing right now is like a set of tools which helps your belief system, your worldview. In academics, we call it the worldview, how you see the world.
Yeah.
When do you think that happens in a person's life? Because I very much think my upbringing, my traditions, my religion guides my business decisions, my interactions with humans, and my goals, and how I plan to achieve them. So, if you don't have to be religious or believe in a religion in order to have a toolbox, you can have a set of morality and whatnot. So when do you think that happens in a person's life?
I think it's happening all the time, David. I think people are always changing that toolbox and always that, but it's hard, and it's hard to change, and you have to, it's a big deal. So people, it's a lot easier not to, and it's easier just to, even if you see conflicting information that would actually move your core and make you adjust that toolbox, you will find reasons and you'll make things up. Or if there's easily handed to you solutions to not have to, you won't, right? And I think that's what I see, if you want to take that toolbox analogy and you building it, is if you do have a religious upbringing, that is, a basic one handed to you. If you don't, it's usually your parents, right, that take that role, that are instilling your core values. As you go, you can be inflicted either way. And some of these religion light or sub-religions or whatever people are using as religion in place of that can take it on, and people are feeling so latched on to those ones. And because the faith is so old and so
faith is a really important thing also.
But faith is so old and comes from so long that these newfangled ones that people are, like having money as your running tradition, that gets you onto a wheel that they want you. It almost seems like society wants you to have that as your predominant. For the society to work quicker, or to work efficiently, they want people to just go to work, come home. They don't want you to ask questions. They don't want you to do all these things. So I think there's so many forces at play stopping you from, forcing you into building your toolbox that way, so that you are prioritizing money and financial success as your main tenet, and everything that comes below that, whatever else that is, from your culture, from your friends, from your parents, from maybe religion, right? Some people lose pieces of religion and hold on to others, but it's a mishmash of all that things at points. But I think what scares me is with, say, we'll just use the money example, is there's so many powers at play that are forcing people from, right? That's the things, asking people about their grades over their dreams, right? That's what's keeping people in that box. Keeping people on this traditional path, keeping education systems very strict to that path, keeps people on that thing, and they don't want people to wake up to it. I think that is what I think is so dangerous. And then especially on top of that too, is maybe it's not money, maybe it's one of these new cultural revolutions that people are really getting behind and really making their identity. It's a problem when it becomes your identity, because now an identity that is not based in love and harm, or in love and compassion, is going to want to keep you. They're never going to want you. They don't want you to explore and come back, right? That faith has something to it that they're not forcing you to follow it. They want you to, and they think it would be better for you if you did. But if you don't, you can flock, right? If the flock wanders, it can come back. That kind of core idea. But with these new ones, they don't want you to ever leave. They don't want you. They want you to be on their team, with their culture, with their identity. And they set it up this way, so now you can't. They shut down any conversation and anything that could interrupt that programming that they're trying to keep you on. And that scares me, because it doesn't allow people the freedom. If you had the freedom to listen to other viewpoints, and then you decided on that one that seems good, that's awesome. But now, if the viewpoint you decide on now disallows you from taking any other viewpoints in, now we have a problem. And that's what scares me, is that I feel like we see that more and more. And all these ones that are holding that if you want to come to us, that's fine. We're based in love. If it works for you, it's great. Are falling to the wayside. And these ones that want you to stay on, don't listen to anybody else, this is your path, stay here, are growing in power. And this is what I think need some, like you were talking about, doing it person to person, and making them get back in touch with those dreams, and maybe grabbing that toolbox of whatever it is, and at least giving it a shake so that people realize it's in them, because so many people don't even realize that toolbox is inside them, and that's what's dictating all these things they're doing. That is an awakening in itself of realizing that's there. But I think,
to that point of what you're saying, something that's I'm always full of dreams, right? Like I'm always excited. I always wake up.
I know I think that is exactly what drew me to you so strongly, was I could see how full of dreams you are, and how you've concocted your toolbox so that when dreams come up to you, you have everything in place to make them happen. And that is what I think is
or at least to try. And don't get me wrong, to try. Because we can say make them happen, but here I am hustling and struggling, and you can say, wow, this guy's doing it and making it happen. But the fact that I wake up thinking I haven't yet is why I keep dreaming, right? Otherwise, I think the dreams are done. But that's my personality. But then I meet, whether it's friends or family or people I don't know that I come across, that tell me in their early 20s, late 20s, and this is not a bad thing. It's just a different perspective, and we need to recognize that there's different people, right? Like there may be people listening to us right now thinking, what are these guys talking about dreams? Right. What is a dream? 100%. I've never had a dream. I don't know how that feels. Okay, cool. Toolbox and morality, we can go all over it. But the reality is I've come across people that say, I don't know what I want to do with my life. And it is so black and white, man. This black and white concept of what am I going to do with my life? There's no, and what I tell people is there's no direct answer to that question. No one knows. Obama didn't know. He doesn't know now that he's not president anymore, and he didn't know before he became president. Donald Trump, on the other side of the coin, didn't know, doesn't know, will not know. They're always waking up with a new perspective on what they're doing and how they want to do it, and then they put goals, and then they try to pursue them. But they don't have a straightforward answer, whether it's from a political perspective or sports players that say, what am I going to do with my life? And a lot of people are graduating university thinking, I don't have a dream. I cannot make a dream just like my colleague or my peer that said, I want to be a doctor. I can't see it so clear. I don't know what to do now. And then people are entering into depression. People are entering into anxiety. And these are real pandemics in our world. COVID is a big one. This is way bigger, man. And we're treating it with medicine. We need to be treating it with love. We need to be treating it with questions. We need to be treating it with camaraderie. We need to be there for people. We need to give them a chance to try things. And after they try things, we need to give them a chance to explore whether that feels like a dream. And you don't have to know what your dream is to pursue it. You need to pursue something and then say, hey, that's maybe what my dream is.
Yes. And I think
it's a tough conversation.
Yeah, it is. And I think a big, huge piece that I believe in, apologies to all the listeners, because I've mentioned on every podcast for the last 6 of them, but I think imposter syndrome is a huge piece of this that people don't understand, because to everybody else, when you see these people becoming doctors and stuff, it seems like, oh, they know what they're doing. They have this all figured out. But those doctors are going through, they don't know what step of the, right? Someone that's done all the amazing things that you have, you wake up every day, you're just figuring it out as you go along. And that flip of the switch of understanding that nobody knows what they're doing and everybody's just trying this was the first. And maybe I'm putting more emphasis on this because that was my own journey that was a huge realization for myself. As soon as I made that realization of, nobody knows what they're doing. I always felt like I was special.
Nobody. Say that again and again and again.
Yeah, exactly. Because I always thought I was special, but that imposter syndrome would be like, oh, look at all these people being successful. I am nowhere close to that. I don't feel like, I feel like I could do something, but I always had that imposter syndrome pulling me down. And then with podcasting, they opened up that dynamic to me about imposter syndrome, and I, realize that, and then it starts to influence the way you start walking through the world. You start to see that, and you have compassion for people. The CEO of some company makes some big blunder. They go, "What, that idiot? That guy thought he," and everyone laughs at him. But he's just anybody else. He was trying his best every day to get to that point, right? If you root things in compassion and love, like we're kind of keeps coming back up, it gives you that.
And I'll tell you, we can link that to another thing, which is, look. Maybe because when I was in high school and we moved from Venezuela to the United States, my parents started over from scratch, and I used to work for my dad, and I went to his business, and I got very early in life an opportunity to gain confidence in public, to gain confidence dealing in business, because I was put on the spot. Go do this accounting, go treat that client, go see if you can swipe his credit card on a machine. And I was 14, I'm like, how does this work, Imposter syndrome. Like, I don't know how to do that. Who cares?
Exactly.
Try it. It doesn't matter. And I had the support of a good father and a good mother who said, do it. It's okay. Now, I have people in my office today who are older than me, who I say, hey, get that on the phone and call the deputy director at the Ministry of Health. I mean, this is a guy who's 17 steps away from being the minister. Like, it's not a big deal.
Right.
Call the deputy director at the Ministry of Health of this department and tell him that I need him to sign this contract,
Right.
because we are delaying the construction. And the girl would say like, oh, no, like, I cannot do that. That's the deputy director. This guy is so high up. I mean, this is a completely different conversation, but it is super linked to this whole idea of imposter syndrome, of not being able to pursue dreams because we don't think we're good enough. And this whole idea that there's people that are better than us is false. I think what there is, which we do need to recognize, is that there's people that are deserving of a little bit more cordiality or respect because they're a little bit busier than usual, or maybe they have less time for you. So if you're calling the president of the United States, he's not a superior human to you. He's just, or the president of another country, he's just another human being. Maybe he has less time, and there are more people responsible for what you may be able to reach out to. So you might not need to directly go to him because there's a division of responsibilities. But pardon my bad language, but what I tell the employees that come up to me and say, hey, I don't think I can call the so-and-so, the minister or the what, I tell them, everyone wipes their own ass.
100%.
It's this concept that when you go to the toilet and you take a shit, you have to roll. I mean, I don't know. I think The Dictator, that movie called The Dictator, where Sacha Baron Cohen, I think he had someone do it for him. Part of the graphic. Other than that, I think from Bill Gates to the sheiks of Saudi Arabia to anyone in Latin America, anywhere you go in the world, a person goes to the toilet and has to do the most basic and potentially raw task of your day, which is wipe your own butt. And if you can conceptualize the fact that this guy still has to roll the paper and do it himself, you can get on the phone and get him on the phone and talk to him like any other person you are. And bring it down to that level, man. We are all out there. And if you can see it like that, you can walk up to a president and shake his hand and say, I'm proud of what you're doing, or I disagree with your ideas. You can walk up to your CEO at your office in an elevator and say, hey, my name is so-and-so, and here's who I am, and here's where I come from, and here's where I want to be, and I would love to grab coffee with you one day. And if you put yourself out there enough times, life changes.
And even to take it to an even more basic level than that, David, I think you're right. You can walk through the world and interact with people with more confidence than that. But I think you can just walk through the world easier. I think you're right that it's a pandemic of people that don't have that understanding and feel so badly about themselves because they have this warped sense of the world that makes everything seem like you're doing poorly and it's
you're
set
not
up
deserving. You're not deserving.
Yeah, you're not deserving. I think just having that realization, not only does it help you further yourself in life, but I think it also just gives you that space to have a breath and enjoy yourself. And I think that is a bigger piece of, now we have billions of people around the world that are unhappy, and a huge piece of it is because of that. And then my question that I brought up on a couple podcasts, so why are we not teaching this concept of imposter syndrome in our schools? From a young age, have that concept come out so that as you're building that toolbox, that's one of your tools in there. Is to know, right? That makes no sense to me. And just going to that fact again was something I've really struggled with lately. Like the last couple of weeks, it's been killing me. Is those three tenets you talked about, right? Accountability, generating answers, and setting goals with no stops or excuses, right? That seems so obvious to me now. It took me a lot of years to get to that point and to really take that on for more than the words, because there's a lot of meaning behind them that's more than just the words. Anybody can read those words, right? In any self-help book, you'll probably see those. But to make that realization, but you know where I didn't see those, and I didn't even see people trying to bring people there, was my 4 years of university. I went to business school, and I felt like there was nobody singing that message. And I feel like that was a message where if you have your best and brightest minds, if you wanted them to come out, you want them to come out at the other end of university with certain knowledge bases, right? Depending on what the degree is. But more than that, in any degree, whether you're in science, whether you're in business, those tenets of, be accountable, set goals, generate answers, that will help you in whatever you go. But it's not.
I agree. Your questions are real, and I agree, and I think it's missing, and I think universities are trying their best, but the people who are running these programs have the same problems. They have the same issues. They weren't taught these things, and they have the imposter syndrome in many cases. And
Mm-hmm.
there's it's a call. You're making a call to action, Nick. Like what you're doing here is amazing. It's a call to action to let the educators of the world know we need better life skill classes.
Yes.
We need
Yes.
more out there in the world classes. We need
Mm-hmm.
someone to give when I was in university, I created a program. It's sad because sometimes we create things and we do them a few times and then they die because we're not good leaders and we're not taught to
Right.
do. Leadership is not about how you lead people, but how you let people be inspired to continue leading after you're done. And after
Right.
you're done might be when you're done completely, like you've moved out, or when you're done, as in like when you finish your interaction, can they carry your message with?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And
Mm-hmm.
churches are very good at that, right? Like they share your message and then you go home and you impose it in your home. Why, as
Right.
leaders in the commercial world, in the classroom, in society, are we not having that same impact of leadership?
Yes.
Which is, I create an organization instead of just the message dying with the end of the tone with my word. Why is the message not being carried through? And that's that's how I define good leadership is, can your message be carried through the people around you and after you're done with the organization? And many of the things I created went to crap. Like they never continued. Why? Because it needed me. And if it needed me, it means I wasn't a good leader really enough to be able to allow it to continue without me. And one of the things that we built was this thing called Dream Your Future. And we were in University of Chicago. I went with one or two friends, people who were nothing like me. One guy was a football player, ran next to the guy who runs running back or something like that. He gets the ball and runs it for a for a touchdown.
Yeah.
And then another girl was something else. And we got together and we said, why don't we go to a third grade class in the inner city of Chicago? I'm talking about a low income family maybe, and say, walk in and ask people what do they want to do with their lives. And Dream Your Future was this thing where we brought speakers to the class. We brought a police officer, we brought a lawyer, we brought an engineer, we brought a cleaner, and we told them, be confident. Tell these people why you love what you do. Don't come tell them, oh, I didn't want to be a police officer. Let's find a police officer that wanted to be a police officer, that it loves being a police officer. Let's put him in this room and let's help them encourage kids to be a police officer. So we did it with like 10 careers. And then we give kids a week to think about it. And we came back a week later and we put this poster where like everyone had to stamp their hands. And inside their hand stamp, they needed to write their name and what was their dream. What did they want to be? Define it in a few words. It could be a career, it could be whatever you wanted. We didn't care. Maybe if somebody wrote happy, we would have been okay with that. That's your dream.
Yeah.
But these type of things need to happen more in the classroom. And it's back to your point of like teaching the imposter syndrome, teaching people that you need to generate answers, that you need to have no excuses, that you need to have accountability. All of that can be taught in the context of dreaming your future. And here it takes me back to the beginning of our conversation now, which I told you, I'll tell you later what people wrote and what they wanted to be a year from now, 3 years from, 5 years from now, and 10 years from now. People left blank the last page. Nick, most people, 2 people called me crying. I don't even know. I mean, I didn't know I had this impact, like negative impact, They called me crying saying, I don't know what to put, boss, on this answer. The last page is super difficult. So what about it is difficult? Says, I don't know what 10 years from now, what does that mean? I never thought about these are people in their 30s and late 20s telling me that they'd never heard of this concept of 10 years from now. And that was impactful. So how many people are not even envisioning 10 years? I'm not asking you exactly what you want to be, but when I ask you 10 years from now, where do you foresee your family life? You should know whether you want to see yourself married or not married. Envisioning it, it doesn't matter. It's not set in stone. Do you want to have some kids or no kids? There's no set thing. You want to be happy. Do you want to have a home with your family? Do you want to rent? Tell me a story. And most people left the last page blank, man.
Right. And I think this all ties together. I think I see it personally, and I know my degree was very economics based, so I see it as an incentive problem. I think, like I said, what's good for society from a business standpoint is for people not to ask those questions, not to look out the future and try and dream. It's to keep these. I think that's why we don't teach imposter syndrome in school. I think that's why the university systems are tailored to give you specific knowledge without the real key knowledge that you need to enact, or without the tools to enact that knowledge into, because what they're incentivized to do is just to put worker drones out into. They don't want people that are going to try and shake up the paradigm for the most part, right? It could be beneficial, could be not, but on the whole, if you just want to take it down to numbers, all you want is just for it to not rock the boat. If you have those tools, you don't want everybody else to have those tools. If I'm sitting up on my mountain and I've already got it set up, I've used those tools of generating answers to acquire my wealth, and now I'm sitting on top of this tower. I don't want those below me coming up to be able to learn these tools that I got here, or else they could overthrow me. And I feel like that is one of the bigger issues, and that's what we got to start to look for, is as we start to awaken to this realization that we need that we need to change. We need to incentivize people towards dreaming and towards setting goals and giving them the tools to enact those. We need to find the areas that is stopping us from doing that, and that's where I kind of go back to these pseudo-religious areas that people are really making their identity these days. And they're not allowing people to learn these goals, because these goals fly in the face of a lot of them. They don't want you to generate answers. Generating answers requires asking questions. They don't want you to answer questions. They want you to take their answers. They don't want you to generate your own, right? They don't want you to set goals because they want you to take on their goals, right? They don't want you to be accountable. They just want you to be accountable to them.
And I don't know if it's that conscious. I'm not disagreeing with you, but I don't know if it's such a conscious decision to not let you want to generate
100%. It's more of a,
I think it's just more of like the system is not encouraged to help us see things differently. And there's nothing wrong with having different types of dreams, and not everyone is proactive enough to want to start a company. Not everyone is reactive enough to want to be an employee. And we're born with different waves, lengths, and by default, society will filter in, and everyone will end up in different levels. And some of them will have accomplished their dreams, and some of them won't. And that's kind of the balance of energies we have in the world, and that's how it will be. But I think we could definitely, and I agree with you on this, we could definitely do a better job in encouraging questions, and encouraging conversations, and encouraging dreams, because at the end it just creates more satisfaction, less depression, less anxiety. A lot of people are talking about depression and anxiety like buzzwords, but no one is really talking about how to fix it without the buzz. Forget the buzz. How do we get to the core of like grabbing a 10-year-old and making sure we don't miss the signs that he's leading a path of drug abuse by the age of 20, of depression by the age of 18? Can we stop labeling people, please? Can we stop telling people you're a depressed child, you're anxious, you're OCD, you're ADHD? How many kids did I not see all around me in my life, friends, family, colleagues, peers, that were being told they have these problems, Forget the problems. Let's tell them you have these solutions, you have these opportunities, you have these visions. I struggle with this, man. Our system is not broken in people in the intention of the system. I don't think there's a negative intention towards destroying us, because that wouldn't make sense. I wouldn't be surrounded by the people I'm surrounded. But I think there is a failure in finding the positivity channels, the good energy. Yes. And I'm not telling people to go do yoga and Reiki and that stuff. I've never done it, so I'm not suggesting it. I'm saying there are simple ways. There are simple ways for us to come together and drive proactivity and happiness and visions of our own lives going forward. Because why? The way I see it is, and I keep bringing depression and anxiety up because I see it more often, and it's quite scary. 100%. And the way I've come to understand it is that depression and anxiety is about recycling things of the past and not being able to look forward. And this whole conversation we've had, and how we've kind of channeled the conversation up to now, and is that why are we not looking forward enough? Why are we not dreaming enough? Why are we not pursuing enough? Why are we not breaking the roadblocks that allow us to dream enough? And the consequences of that is bringing us back to our past, bringing us back to what our failures, to what we cannot accomplish. And that's the cycle that a lot of our friends, man, I'm sure you, and I'm speaking in general, but a lot of our friends, family members are going through.
And especially where I'm living now, the Northern Alberta oil sector is been hit pretty heavily with just everything going on and the prices of oil. I mean, you're from Venezuela, you know this better than anybody, but we're starting to feel that same hit. And when there's a lot of people that are happy when things are going well and things are going status quo. When things start to there's a lot of patches over real serious wounds, I think, in the world, and when things start to go down. And I think, like you say, you're not telling people to do yoga and Reiki because you've never done them. I think that's what I want this podcast to be, is to help give people, talk about my own journey and my own things that help me, right? I know if for my own mental health, I struggle with depression and anxiety myself, and I know what I need. I know I need to run every day. I know I need to meditate every day. I know
That's
I need to
amazing.
pursue something for myself, which is this podcast that I need to
That's
keep going,
amazing.
as well as all my work stuff. And I think a lot of people are scared to do those things because they think it'll sacrifice, their work will sacrifice for it. But what I find is that I know what I need to be doing for work and what it requires of me. And if I'm not letting these other things falter, I'm not able to do that as fully as I can. And I think that is the balance that needs to be brought forward. So that's what I see. I'm not going to go recommend people do Reiki or anything that I've never done. I agree with you, but I think starting this podcast, it holds me accountable to always be working on myself, so I can always bring those tools to others. Right? If I hear something that I think is really powerful and might help, right? Here's something, breath work. I've always heard that we really don't understand breathing as much as we can. The way we've evolutionarily developed to breathe, we're not really up to snuff because of a lot of the ways we're built, and the foods we eat is very different from how we were traditionally. Anyways, so I bought this book, Breathe, and I plan on reading it, going through that, maybe finding an expert in it, bringing them on, because if there's something so simple as breathing that I could bring to just that this population that's listening to this that I'm trying to help, that's a huge step forward, right? The importance of sleep. I really have done a lot of research on that.
A good friend of mine, Tracy Norman in South Africa, she's a singer. We've developed a nice friendship over the years. And,
Right.
like we connected over similar things, our families, our visions of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things, it's interesting you said that, is I remember about a year ago, she told me she was taking breathing classes. And I'm always extremely open-minded, especially when I was hearing her, because she always had new perspectives about how to engage. The first time I ever did yoga or meditation, actually, the first time I meditated was with her, because I said, I don't think I can meditate. My mind is always like tak 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 tak, and if I close my eyes and I try to stay quiet, I'm immediately like. And she says,
yeah,
maybe that's your way of meditating. Maybe that's your way of taking a step back and thinking about one channel of thought, just concentrating on one stuff without visuals. It was amazing. And then I started paying attention more to what she had to say. And interestingly, I was not critical of it. I was taken aback when someone tells me they're taking breathing classes, because I was like, what do you mean?
We all know
we're breathing all the time. Like, what are you talking about? And she goes, no, it's about understanding your breathing, what it does for you, understanding how to do it, how often to do it, in which ways to use it. And yeah, I wish you luck on the book, and I would love to hear, when you eventually have someone on about the breathing, because when I was doing my master's in South Africa, I did a master's at the business school of the University of Cape Town. We pay money for this thing, and it was a master's in inclusive innovation. And then they told me I have a 2-hour block on my modular program with some breathing teacher. And I was like, what are you guys talking about? Like, no way. And it happened the same week that Tracy called me to say, hey, I'm taking breathing class. And I said, what's wrong with the world? Are you guys crazy? But that's good. You need to be critical. You have to have perspective of like, am I paying a master's degree to learn to breathe? And that class opened my mind to understanding that our brain needs oxygen, that's what controls our emotions and our thoughts. The way we breathe and how often we start to think about how we're breathing really defines how our day will go. And I commend you for bringing that up, because I don't know enough about it. And this is an interesting topic I hope you discuss, but 100%, there are minor things we can add to our personal toolbox, as well as dreams and all these things, to actually better our days. And like you said, I agree. If you cannot find these things that make your day better, there's no way you can go to work and perform.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I think something that really drives me too is I went to university for 4 years, never listened to a podcast the entire 4 years. Learned a lot. I feel like I learned most of my learnings of university was outside university. Actually, in the residence, I ran a dodgeball league of about 1,600 kids, and it was very, I learned how to hire and fire people. I learned how to do all this. There were so many things I learned from that, more so. But then I left school. I started listening to podcasts, and I found that I could take like a 3-hour podcast with all this information, listen to it on 2 times speed, because with inputs, you can turn them up if they're on, visual or audio, and you can take them in quicker. So I could learn more in 3 hours, which is really an hour and a half. So in an hour and a half, I could learn more than I did in a week of taking a class in school. And that realization to me was so eye-opening and so preposterous, is because then the next step to me, I have a weird efficiency thing, and I'm always trying to do things take in as much info and getting better as the fastest pace that I can. So then I started, what are all these other, I can learn about math. I can learn about the faith. And I think that's where a lot of my ideas flip back around on faith, that I wasn't giving it a full shot. When you give somebody 3 hours to really give a nuanced decision, maybe those first couple points about religion that have usually turned you off, but you haven't got to points 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Once you give them enough time, you can listen to somebody really get into the nitty gritty of what it did for them and listen to their personal stories surrounding it. You get in touch with it, and you can understand these ideas on a much deeper intellectual level. Even in a lecture, right? A lecture you're forced to sit there. You can't listen to it for 15 minutes and take a break and listen to 50 more at your schedule. So, and also it's being forced onto you in some way. There's also another very big, I haven't intellectualized it enough to say, but there's a very big difference between finding something yourself and diving into it and being forced to by whether it's school or whether it's work. There's so much different about that. And I think that is what's going to really open people's eyes. I think we just need to start spreading that message that this information is here. There's how many downtrodden and areas of economic uncertainty throughout the entire world that all they would need access to is a screen and an internet connection and, some sort of translation, and they could have access to, trillions of dollars worth of education really for 100% free. And I think that is really what I see as the power of podcasting. And I feel like people just haven't really caught on. Well, some people are catching on. There wouldn't be a couple $100 million deal going to Joe Rogan at Spotify if it wasn't really something special that people were actually connecting to, right? And it has a 10 times bigger viewer base than most traditional media places. I just think the more voices that can get behind it, the quicker we can make this transition and the good it can bring, the more people should. I feel like almost as soon as you make that understanding of how much it can change, you're almost duty bound. And I feel duty bound that once I made that realization that I should be doing everything I can to bring more people into this fold, make more people have those understandings, whether it's imposter syndrome, whether it's the loss of religion and faith, and giving people that, whether it's just the basics of giving people that compassion and those type of things. I think it's so important. And it's what gets me so excited every day to come back here is I've seen it. It's done this for me. Podcast changed my life. And I think I may not fully have understood all the ways it has so far, because it seems like even on this podcast, things I didn't even realize, I'm coming up with new realizations about how I got to this place. And it's so fun and exciting. And I can't wait to do that if I can do that for one other person, right? If I do this for 20 years, put out 2 podcasts a week of 3 hours of content, and one person gets something out of it, and maybe it's this podcast that takes these goals and they start to make something of themselves or change the direction or just bring a little bit more happiness in their life. That's amazing. Right. And I think that is what the essence of that, whatever that is for you. Maybe it's not a podcast, whatever it is that's going to make you happy and light that fire inside you. That's what we need to start pushing people towards, and tear down some of the taboos surrounding talking about these, so that people can be more open about their goals and not be laughed at or felt any differently about it. So,
no, it's amazing.
Yeah. And that's a little. I said at the very start that I was going to make sure I do a chronological take through of your life so I could get all these facts and orders, and we never really did. Like I said, I'll give a bit in the intro of kind of the things you've done, but I just wanted to start off just to maybe check with you of my own understanding of it. So you were born in Venezuela. You were there till 13 years old. The economic uncertainty and political unrest is what prompted the move to the States in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, look, my father is actually born in Spain, and my mother was born in Morocco, and we are 4 brothers. So the 4 of us were born in Venezuela. We have we are Sephardic Jews, which are actually, it's a type of Jews. Sephardic means Spanish in Hebrew.
Right.
It's interesting that the word Sephardic means Spanish. So we come from hundreds of years of northern Morocco. Families that were kicked out during the Inquisition in the 1400s down to northern Africa. And basically our families come from there. So my 4 grandparents are from northern Africa, in a Spanish-speaking northern Africa, which was colonized by Spain.
Right.
There was uncertainty and unrest and anti-Semitism and economic discrepancy and all of that in the 50s and 60s. And that prompted my parents to move to Venezuela at very early age. Like my dad, I think, was 6 months old. My mom was 4 years old. So even though you see them and you hear, even though they are originally from Southern Europe and Northern Africa, they sound, act, dance, eat, and play like they were Venezuelans. So they grew up in Venezuela. We have a Venezuelan vibe. I love to dance merengue. we eat Venezuelan food. When you tell me, what are you cooking now? I'm making arepas, like my blood flows like that. So I do
Yes.
consider myself, and I am a Venezuelan, by tradition, by culture, by many things. I think at the age of 13, that was 2003 for me, um, we experienced a coup d'etat in Venezuela in 2002. So Hugo Chavez was in power for about 3 to 4 years. He was overthrown. Oil prices had gone through the roof at that time.
Right.
He was benefiting highly from massive government surplus, so he had a lot of money to spend. He created a massive amount of social programs, and he was just overspending, right? Overspending
Right.
money that we should have been saving. Like in the Bible, they say,
Definitely.
save the crops from the good years for the bad years. I
Yep.
think when the good years came, we were just spending as a government. So there was a military coup. His own army tried to overthrow him. They put him in prison. He paid off one guy, got himself back into power. And there were riots in the streets for about 6 months. We didn't go to school, man, in 2003. Most of 2003, there was no school. Like now we're talking about the lockdown. Bro, that was the lockdown for Venezuela in
Yeah.
2003. We're
Wow.
experienced in lockdowns. We know what
Yeah.
it means like to have supermarkets shut down and reserves in your fridge. We know what that meant because in 2002, 2003, I remember as a child, I would sit with a radio recorder and record the TV as the president was being overthrown and report as if I was a reporter saying the president's being overthrown. Let's hear now from the new president. I would put it on the TV. And my
Yeah.
mom found those cassettes the other day, mind blowing, like what we were going through. But there was something else going through, which is that my brothers and I were kidnapped about a year before that.
Wow.
And we were kidnapped in our sleep. Like, we were waking up 5, 6 a.m. trying to go to school. My parents were still sleeping. And, that created a lot of uncertainty for my family.
Of course.
My father was a self-made, hardworking man. So, he worked very hard to get to a level where he was an executive at a company. We lived a very good life. We had living in maids at home. We had a driver. We had a 4-story house. But we were not rich by any means. And I think we grew up pretty much with a very humble upbringing. Like the lady who worked in our house helping clean or helping cook or whatever it is that she was doing, for all I knew, was my sister. Like she was just part of the family type of thing. And so we had a good upbringing. It was nice, but we were in a bubble. And that bubble was burst for me when we were robbed,
Yeah.
And it kind of created a social uncertainty that has actually now been expanded to entire society in Venezuela 20 years later. But that my parents kind of said, we need to get out of here. And when that coup d'etat happened and there was no school available, my father said, I'm willing to give everything up so that my kids can have a better childhood. And I think that was a big inflection point in our life. But I think it was also like a very difficult thing. I mean, you and I are young enough to not be even thinking that that's difficult. If somebody says you have to leave Canada right now and start over and move somewhere else, all right, man, like, it's a beating in the face, but you'll get up and do it.
I can figure it out.
If you tell a couple who has no roots in the other country, go to the new country, buy a new house, set yourselves up, build a new business, give up your economic certainty, your social certainty, your religious certainty in some ways, because you have to start over finding faith and finding a group to believe with.
Right.
Yeah, it was tough. So for me, it was an adventure.
Yeah.
We moved, but for them, that was a tough move, and it's a sacrifice, and it's something that is not spoken about enough from the right or the left wings of society, is that immigration is not people trying to come to your country taking advantage of it.
No.
It's about people really struggling in where they're coming from, whether it's economically. So nobody moves because they're trying to play your side. They're moving because they have good intentions. They do it because they're willing to give so much up to start over and to do better. And if you could actually harvest that energy, you could see immigration in that way, really. And I don't want to be labeled now, oh, this guy's a leftist or a righty or whatever. No. I'm so mixed in so many things that it's very hard to define me, and you could find that through conversation. But if you could actually see immigration and harvest the energy of immigrants, harvest the energy of, that's how America was built.
Yes. 100%.
That's how half of Canada was built. I mean, So yeah, man, that's something I wanted to throw in there because we're talking about so many things that I thought, immigration is an interesting thing, and I've been through it so many times, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah, you have, and I think you nailed something that, again, when I talk about that human capital that's not being fully utilized enough. I think same thing for me. Both my grandparents escaped on. I mean, the entire flip side of this from German. They were German and they escaped to Canada during World War II, and
wow,
like they said, they were very well off, had a big estate there, and ran to start
yeah,
a small pig farm in northern Alberta. And it was, or I guess at the start, work on a farm. It wasn't starting a farm at that point. They worked
yeah,
for a couple of years. First my grandpa came over, and then I think 2 years later, just by letter, weren't even married yet, my grandma came over, didn't speak any English. But you see that drive and that whatever it is, that passion. It's almost, what I think it is going through something, so having to be forced to give up everything after you've built up a life for yourself and having to start over. It's one of the biggest leveling ups and the most it's the hardest thing you can go through, but almost nothing else will make you better, as much better in such a short time as that will. I said that very inarticulately, but the basis is
no,
right.
no. I
And
picked that up in a nice way. I think
yeah,
it's a strong message. It'll build you
yeah,
stronger, and it'll build the society around you stronger.
exactly. And I think that is how you go through that. And I think that understanding is what's lost. But I think this is another issue where you talk about immigration, and it's one of those things where I see the issue we talked about earlier, where there can't be any discussion on it, because if you want to have more of a nuanced discussion about these great things, and there's plus and minus to it, you kind of have to follow the party line of what it is, or you're labeled all these things. I think you even said, I'm just saying that I don't want to be labeled as left and right, because I can see both sides of this, right? Everybody is worried about that. That is what I see as the issue. I think because you can't have a discussion on it, it shuts it right down. You don't get to hear, nobody gets to discuss these things of all these incredible stories of immigration and what they bring to, and you just get labeled something else if you want to have that conversation, right? So if you want to talk
I
about the
appreciate
beauty
that.
of
Yeah,
it, right? If you want to talk about the beauty and all the strength that you come out of it, you get labeled one thing. But if you want to talk about maybe some legitimate downsides, even though you appreciate that, you get labeled on the other side. And I just think anywhere I see where discussion is being stifled, I think that is somewhere we have to dive right into and talk about and take long form, right? Anywhere you see that, that's where you got to jump to. But then my second piece of that is something that I've been trying to articulate over the last couple of years. That big moment I think I talked about after university, finding podcasts and being really shifted forward. In a way where when you asked me what I thought the job that they would all pick in Africa, I thought, well, I don't really know African culture that well to be able to guess. So I kind of related it to what I could say of things I've seen on movies, things that I've seen myself, and then my personal experience with the African culture, which was going to university, and I saw lots of people trying to be doctors. Right, that's the way I try and look at the world. I try not to take anything. Media can twist things, but those are the way that I hold it. What I found was and that was an experience for me. And growing up with it was very very white. Growing up in northern Alberta, there was there's melting pots from some places, but it was very specific, right? There'd be certain cultures like the Philippines came in very heavily, and I know a lot about that culture now because of that influence. We didn't see it, and I found that was very similar with Jewishness. And I never knew any Jewish people, never met one, didn't know what it was, had no idea. Went to university, didn't really meet anyone, didn't hear much about it. My knowledge of the Jewish religion was pretty much what you hear from World War II history, and that they were prosecuted in that, and that was pretty much my only knowledge base. And then I came into podcasts, and I see all these amazing Jewish intellectuals that are just blowing my mind with these theories I've never heard anywhere else. And I was just thinking, man, this is incredible. And comedians and just all these things, and it got me thinking. What is it about that faith that can and when doing a little more digging, the logic base and working around and trying to figure things out, and I just think that is such a powerful thing. And people always jump to the bad sides of these things, but what is it about maybe Jewish culture in your aspect, growing up with it, that is so powerful and gives you these strong moral goals and outreach to bring yourself forward? And just maybe you could break that down to help me understand it, because that's something I'm struggling. I can see the effects of it, but I haven't got the inputs that have gotten me there, and it leaves me in in a very curious state because I've just never had the opportunity to speak to someone and ask these kind of questions where I'm a very curious person. But maybe the same way I would have these curiosities about African culture, but I never had an opportunity to discuss it with them, or all these other ones I had. So maybe you could just start. And I was thinking what brought me to that was the thought of having to make that move and give up everything like you talk about, and that being such a powerful shift that you bring with you throughout your entire life. I think also having your religion be the only thing you can carry with you when you do make a change like that is also just as impactful. And just maybe that as a whole, and how that educates how you pursue yourself going forward, and in the roles you're doing today and wanting to take on in the future.
Well, that's an amazing question.
No,
it's a good question. What I meant it's heavy is that I just wrote down 2 or 3 things that you asked.
Yeah,
so that I can actually. So no, but for me, man, so that I can actually think about this, discuss it with myself. Mm-hmm. For me, like, how come I don't have that answer so quickly? And I think it's because when something makes you think, it's a good question, you know. Right. So let me try to break it down. I mean, the first thing is, maybe let me start at the end, and then let me try to find the answer from the beginning. So
I'm sure I'll have more questions that pop up as we discuss it. So,
because one of the things you said is that, like, when you move, you can carry your religion with you. And I actually got up once. You can hopefully in some cases you can, and usually and I think that's something that I have always done. And it's interesting, you know. I got up once on a Friday night dinner. We call it Shabbat. Shabbat means the seventh. The Sabbath actually comes from Sheba, which means 7 in Hebrew. It's the 7th day of the week, because in the Jewish calendar you start on Sunday. So that's what Shabbat comes from, the Sabbath. So anyway, on the 7th day we take a day off. That's the Judaism. That's one of the biggest things in Judaism. There's a day off. It's a family day. You don't work. You take it for yourself. You're introspective. And one time I got up in a synagogue where we were having dinner afterwards, celebrating the 7th day. And I said, I'm not from here. I don't know anyone here. We've just prayed the same prayer that I prayed in another country and in another continent, that my parents taught them from having learned in a other continent, another 3rd generation ago. So first of all, this carry on of tradition, I think, is one of the hooks. But what I was trying to talk about when I got up to say that was, I feel complete today. I feel like I have something that I can connect to, despite not being from this place, not knowing anybody. There is something that brought us together, some commonality. And that commonality is based on love, is based on good deeds. You know, I think that I don't know all the religions of the world. I don't think anyone does, unless you're an expert in religious studies. But there are many types of religions, and Judaism falls within this religion of monotheism. So you believe in only one God. We don't worship, let's say, other things than God. But so fortunately or unfortunately, depending on who's taking the perspective, is that pretty much we don't put other things at the center of our life and our belief. We don't attribute to things what is happening or not happening. There are people that have idols and whatnot. But one of the core tenets of Judaism is that there's no idolatry. You don't, in Latin America, there are virgins for like every circumstance and everything. And, you could spend your whole life thinking and praying around a virgin, but not really kind of finding things for yourself. So I think one of the things that we, and I'm not qualifying this, I'm just explaining it. I think
of course,
in Judaism, it's monotheism. There's one God. And I think that's a core thing about Judaism. The other thing about Judaism is that it's very rich in tradition. And, one time when I was younger, I asked my grandfather, do you believe in God? And I would ask you the same question, and you can ask it back to me. But to me, the person that I had the most pure form of trust was my grandfather, my mom's dad, let's say. This is the guy I asked the question. His name was Abraham. And I said, do you believe in God? And he said, yes, I do. Now, when he said, yes, I do, in my head, I was like, okay, me too, right? Like if he does, then me too. And then that's the naive and good and easy way to say God exists. But then I questioned it anyway. And I said, why? Why do you believe in God? Can you please tell me, how do you know God exists? And before I give you his answer, I want to tell you that that's another core tenet of Judaism, which is questioning.
Yeah. Yes.
In Judaism, you can question stuff. That you know, I'm fluent in Hebrew. I can read Aramaic, which is an Arabic form of Hebrew that was used by scholars, thousands of years ago. And I can tell you, man, that any scripture that you're reading, any Jewish book, the Jewish books were written by rabbis, were not written by like something we cannot see. So our books are all attributed to people. And one of the core books of Judaism, which is used in, there's the Bible, which has 5 chapters for us, 5 books that are thick, and Genesis and so on. That tells you the story of the people. But one of the other core books of Judaism is called the Talmud, Talmud, the Talmud. Yeah. And the Talmud is the book of law. If I'm not mistaken, it has 32 tomes. Right. And the entire thing is a debate between rabbis. So the law is written, and I'm not talking, it's unbelievable. Why it's used in law school is that I've studied from it. Sometimes I actually study Talmud. I'm not extremely religious. I don't keep kosher, unfortunately. There's things I don't do about Judaism, even though I'm highly traditional. But when rabbis are, when I've studied this law book, you read the Aramaic portion, which is like this big. Like, let's say the page is the size of the screen that I'm speaking in right now. Right. And, maybe 1/12 of the screen is actually the law. And the law, man, goes from like how to marry a woman if you're a man, what are the things that need to be done, to what happens if your goat destroys the fence of your neighbor, and then all the different things that can happen when the fence is destroyed. Like, that's how deep these books go into laws, right? Now, the real substance is not the law, it's what they call the commentary on the sidelines of each page. Yes. And the commentary, unbelievably, is 3 to 4 rabbis, 5 rabbis, Maimonides, Rambam, like all these guys, Rabbi Hillel, giving commentary as to how they interpret the law. Yeah. And it's a debate, and they are all against each other, and they put reasons to, and the whole religion is about reading the commentary. And these are not mystical things. This is about what happens when the fence of your neighbor gets broken. It's more like law and judges and judicial court. So there's nothing about this that's like mystical or scary, or when you think of religion, you think of things that don't exist. Yeah. In our religion, we're reading this book like when you're in your teenage years and you're debating what happens, who pays for the fence? Is it you or the neighbor? What if when your goat destroys your neighbor's fence, the dog of your neighbor kills your goat? Does your neighbor pay you for your goat? Do you pay for his fence? And then a rabbi said this and a rabbi said that. So just to show you that, like, in this entire debate, one of the things that is happening definitely is opening up your mind. Who cares about the goat and the dog? That's not your goat or your dog. It's a story from 1,000 years ago. It's about opening up our minds. It's about asking questions. It's about exploring. And I think some of the biggest intellectuals went through that or go through that in some simple ways. And that exact philosophy of the religion is extrapolated to the home. I mean, if you sit in a Jewish family's home over dinner, well, the debate that is going on over rocket science, and nobody in the table is a rocket scientist. But it's like, and I say this and you say that, and it's not an aggressive debate. This is the type of conversations that were in my home. We grew up debating rocket science, debating chemistry, debating biology. These were the questions that were brought up in our dinner table. And one of those was me asking my grandpa, do you believe in God? And why do you believe in God? And I got to question that. Yeah. And that was a fair question, and no one ever frowns upon when you do that. And I think that's very important. And, in our religion, there is nothing that you cannot see other than God. Everything else is pretty straightforward, I would say, in my opinion. So I want to know this one thing that I cannot see. How do you know it exists? Yeah. Now, his answer to this day assures me that there is a God. And it's because my grandpa said it to me. Now, my grandpa's not your grandpa, so it's very hard for you to take it on and be like, oh, cool, I believe it. No. My grandpa said to me, look, I asked that question to my grandpa when I was your age. And he also told me that God exists. Now, you see, Russian people, I don't speak Russian, I've never been to Russia, and Russia has Jews, and Venezuela has Jews, and Morocco has Jews, and we're all spread out, unfortunately, around the world because life happens like that and we've globalized ourselves. Today, Venezuelans are all over the world, you know? He says, when you read the Torah, the story of the Jewish people in Russia over the last 2,000 years, and the story of the Jewish people in Venezuela, or Morocco, like through Morocco, you know, like the Sephardics, people who never met, who technology never put together, letters never crossed. The Torah is the exact same. You go to a synagogue in Russia and pick up a 500-year-old book that tells the story of the Jews. It's the exact same. Now, 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, whenever the Jews left Egypt, which there is physical evidence for the Hebrews having been in Egypt. You know, there's pyramids. There under the pyramids there are pharaohs that were buried, and there's a story of the Jews escaping. When they left, they wrote in this book that there was a God, that they experienced this entire thing, that they were in Mount Sinai when God spoke to them and gave them the 10 Commandments. You know, now we're getting into the depth of a little bit of the religion, but all of them shared the same story. And they went to different parts of the world over the last 2,000 years, and the story is exactly the same within our religion all over the world. So why, if I tell you a gossip right now, secret, privately over the phone, I call you and I gossip about, hey, did you know this guy's dating this girl, and this is what he said. And you tell that to another person, and 10 people share that story. By the time the 10th person hears it, they'll say that they got married and then divorced, because they'll change my story to some other story 10 conversations later.
Right.
So that's typical of humanity. We take a story and we add details. My brothers always say I exaggerate my stories and like I make them so colorful. And, you know, if I was in charge of passing on the story of the Jewish people, by the time it got to me, I would have changed a few ideas and a few facts. So I think what my grandpa said at the end was, you see, the story is the same. Over hundreds of years, it stayed the same, and it was told from grandfather to grandchild the same, from the original grandfathers 20 generations ago that were in that mountain receiving the 10 Commandments, seeing miracles happen, opening of the seas. So I cannot guarantee you that the sea opened for them. And I cannot guarantee you that any of them heard a voice and 10 Commandments were given. But what I can tell you is that I believe my grandfather, and my grandfather before him had the faith to believe in his grandfather, that eventually all their grandfathers, one of them generations back, experienced this for himself.
Right.
And if you carry that on in your faith, and you carry on this belief that I'm telling you this happened, you know, in my lifetime, he said, I experienced a lot of bad things that happen in the world and a lot of really good things that happen in the world, miracles. At a personal level and at a historical level. We mentioned World War II. I mean, the Holocaust happened. There's no way I can deny that, because I've been inside a concentration camp and I've seen the evidence with my own eyes. And what my grandfather told me is, if your grandchildren don't believe you about the Holocaust having happened, even though we did not see the evidence, then it will not pass on. But if you can tell them that you saw it with your own eyes, that you visited a concentration camp, that also negative things happen, they will believe it happened and the message will carry on. And I think it's this, you know, it brings us back to our original conversation about faith and all these things. It's that our religion, or, you know, Judaism does, and how I've experienced it, anyone can tell you otherwise. It's based on love. There's no, you go to a synagogue and you pray for good things. You don't pray for bad things for anyone.
Right.
We don't try to spread it. So you can convert to the religion, you can practice it, but we're not evangelists in the sense that we knock on your door and say you need to accept the Jewish faith in order to be pardoned. We don't have, we don't believe in hell. The concept of hell doesn't exist for us. You don't go to hell. Everyone goes to their life races to heaven, to the other world. So I think there's enough things that are not negative around the practicing of the religion that allows you to then use your mind to focus on self and focus on society and focus on academic pursuit and thoughtfulness. And I could probably give a shorter and better answer if I took some time to think about it. But I think those are the things that you say you've heard about so many intellectuals. Jewish people, unfortunately, I have to say it's unfortunate, have been kicked out of countries over generations. You see, my father in 1955 moved from Spain to Venezuela because in Spain, being Jewish was not okay. Anti-Semitism was very open, and my father was actually the first circumcision in Madrid in 1955 in dozens of years. There wasn't any Jewish babies being born there. There wasn't a Jewish community in Madrid. My mom left at the age of 4. My mom was born in 1962. I hope she doesn't get upset for me giving up her age, but she was born in 1962, so at the age of 4 was 1966. She left Morocco. Morocco had over 200,000 Jews in 1966. Today, I don't think the number reaches 2,000. They're at 1% of what they were 50, 60 years ago. Why? Because 1967 was the 6-day war in Israel, where the Arab world attacked in surprise Israel with an attack to dissolve the country. And the Jews who were living in Morocco that had nothing to do with Israel were told, you need to go. It's your time. You need to leave this country. And you said something very interesting that I've never heard is, what could they carry with them? I asked my grandma, like, where are all your books from Morocco? And she said, which books? We ran away. We packed up our bags and we got on a boat and we took a few luggages. We weren't put into concentration camps like in Europe, but we had to leave. We sold our property for dimes. The people who were there, when we visit Morocco, which I had the pleasure of visiting with my grandmother, she took me to the buildings her grandfather and father built for them to live. And those were taken over by people who live there now, and they were accepted as if it was their home. It was like, please come in, come in, come in. It was such an emotional moment. But the truth is, bro, Nick, what did they take with them? And they took their faith. They took their family, those who could. They didn't take money, because what is money, right? It's cash, it's paper. So how many assets can you physically take with you in the 1960s? And they took visions and dreams. And this is why having dreams is important, because my grandfather was very successful in Venezuela when he moved. From both sides, they tried really hard. One struggled more than the other, but they both hustled and rumbled. Fast forward 2003, my parents had to leave Venezuela. I remember we had a 4-story home that didn't go with us to the United States. The foreign exchange was blocked. You couldn't take money out of the country. So as a 13-year-old child, I knew that my parents were leaving everything behind, and my mom told me, you have 1 luggage to pack. So I wasn't escaping. Nobody was pushing us out with a gun, but I knew we were leaving everything behind, and we were starting over, and all you can take with you is what you can put in here and what you can carry here. And I think that's it. That's unfortunately for the Jewish people around the world. I'm not saying everyone goes through this. There's people who've been 6 generations in the same place. That's what you get to carry with you. And they've been merchants, they've been traders, and that's.
So then, in hearing that, do you think that knowledge and being here every year, the retelling of those stories and hearing that was part of your people's heritage, to being forced to go, but that they've done it time and time again and been successful wherever they landed. It doesn't matter where they go. It's what's innate to us that brings us forward. Do you think that was something already at that 13 years old? Do you think that had any impact? Do you think you'd already intellectualized it at that point to know that was part of you when you went there? Or do you think that was something that maybe you wouldn't have recognized at that point?
I'm recognizing it now in 2020, speaking to you. When I was 13 years old, man, I was crying my eyes out because my parents had the courage to tell me we were leaving the country. My 2 younger brothers had no idea. They thought we were going to Disney World. We had an apartment in Miami for vacationing. We moved 4 brothers into 1 bedroom, where before we used to have our own entire bedroom, bathroom, closet. Like, we lived like queens and kings, if you wanted to contextualize the difference of what we went from to. We ended up 4 bros in 1 bedroom, a bunk bed and a sofa bed. And when we left, to me, that was amazing. I mean, living with my brothers, all 4 of us in 1 room, was a good feeling. It turned hectic 3 months later because we wanted to like kill each other, running around. Like, how do you study? How do you eat? How do you sleep? Like, it's overwhelming. But the biggest problem I had was, it goes back to this question of your dreams. My mom saw me crying and said, like, why are you crying, man? Like, we're already in America. Like, it's fine. It's finished. Like, move on. And I said, no, you broke my dreams. I'll never be able to be president of Venezuela now.
Wow.
She started crying. She's like, what?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, you took me out of my country. Like, I was going to raise to leadership, and how can I go back? I won't have the legacy and the prestige to be able to run for office. She's like, you're 13, shush. Like, go, my mom was like broken,
Yeah.
But I wasn't seeing it as, I'll do it again. My people have done it. I don't care who my people are my parents. What do you mean they've done it? We were living there. So I don't think I had the vision. And it's a phrase my father has, which is the confidence of the final result. I didn't have the confidence of the final result, which is like when you watch a movie, you're like, oh, that makes sense. That's how they managed to get that done. You don't know what's going to happen until it happens. And when you're going through it, all you can see is the past. And I think as an immigrant, you never think, it's fine, I'll make it happen. When I came to Namibia, I wasn't like, this is fine, I'll make it happen. I was like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do now? I've just landed and I told people I'm going to build houses. Where do I even find land? How do I buy? Like, you're so focused on the details that your vision is so narrow at that time. And it's so easy to have a chat about it now, but it's not the same.
Yeah, and just hearing the confidence in the end state or whatever that is, I think that is almost a bigger piece than we're even giving it credit for. I think what we already talked about in the importance of keeping people's dreams fresh in their mind and keeping them attained towards them, that keeps that confidence in the end goal, right? For this podcast, for myself, I keep hearing people have questions about, well, why is it so long? Why is it so this? It's because I have that confidence in the end goal of what I'm going to turn it into, that I have that faith. But I feel like if I wasn't so passionate in the goal that I want to do, but I think that gives me power to not, because I think that's a lot of mistakes that people do want to do. They have a goal and they start getting on it, but then they start to listen to other people. And actually, it was a quote somewhere in my research with looking you up. There was a quote somewhere. I don't know if it was something you said or something that I heard that stuck with you, but you said, "Keep telling the world where you're headed, or it'll push you off course." And that stuck with me ever since I read it, for these weeks that I've been trying to get you on here since that first conversation we had. That's been stuck with me because I think that is so true. I think if you have the knowledge and you are confident in what you're trying to build, I think it's easy to listen to others. But if you have that confidence of where you want to get to, you have to have that faith in yourself to bring you to that promised line. You have to bring yourself. It's going to be hard work, but if you have that goal in mind and you know already in yourself, you don't have to convince anybody. Everyone's always so worried about convincing other people. If you convince yourself that you're going to put the work in, like I know I'm going to put the work in, I'm going to keep going at this. Now I can keep that dream in my mind of where I want to bring this to, and I can keep building towards it, and I don't get knocked off of, well, why don't you try this? Why don't you try this? I'm still trying to keep an open mind to those, so I don't, throw away any really good input that I could use, but I'm trying to make sure I have that end goal and that confidence in it, so that I can keep on that path and don't get, if I got deviated, I have the confidence I get back on it, but that's a waste of time I don't need. And I think that is so much in even in setting goals with no steps or excuses. The way I see the steps or excuses, if you set goals, that's great. But if you put excuses, just extending out that timeline of getting where you want to be. And it just makes you take longer to get there. And I think that is, that's what's
so I did say that, which is, keep telling the world where you're headed, or you're going to be pushed off course. And I don't think I can attribute that to me. I think it's something my father has said to me in passing, and he doesn't realize the power of his words. My father is my best friend and probably my best support system in everything I do. What I do is done by me, but sometimes you call him and you're like, man, I haven't made any money, and here are all these guys making all this money, and I'm here like struggling, like I've been driving for 6 hours trying to build these houses and that school and this thing. And he's like, hey, just keep telling the world where you're headed, or you're going to be pushed off course. Don't let people push you aside. Don't let these messages of like, oh, you should be going to banking in Wall Street, or you should be, drilling an oil rig on your own instead of trying to start an oil services company. Do what you want to do. Tell the world about it. Push the message, which is all part of this accountability, or you will be pushed off course because you will not be going direct. And this is a basic physics. An airplane says, I'm going in that direction. If you don't do it, and you don't put the thrust in the airplane wings, the wind will push you in the wrong direction. This is physics. This isn't a message that you're supposed to be inspired by because it sounds funny. This is the reality of everything we do. You grab a ball, you throw it in one direction. You just told it where it's going. Otherwise, the wind will push it in a weird direction.
It's entropy, really.
Yeah.
When you break it down, that's what it is. And just before, because I do want to keep going on kind of your story and what got you to Namibia, but I don't want to glaze over because the question about your faith was a pertinent one for myself, because like I said, I kind of alluded to a little bit. I don't think I gave you as much background of how much I've been drawn. I had this weird feeling over the last couple of years of how drawn to Judaism myself. For some reason, I couldn't put my finger on it. And there's so many things. And just, I know you said I probably, if I had more time to prepare, I could have given you a shorter answer. I just want to say thank you for the answer you gave, because there were so many pieces in that answer that answered some really big questions to me that we probably don't have time to get into, but I just want to acknowledge it because it was very meaningful for me. And I answered a lot of questions about myself and where I went through my life and my own journey through religion, and what those pieces that are within Judaism, but within my own traditional religion that weren't there, right? I found what pushed me away from religion was the questioning, and how questioning was treated. I was always questioned. That was my biggest core tenet. I've always questioned everything, and I was told never. Yeah, and I was told never to question anything, and I just couldn't. That was the basic of what I couldn't compute. And then another key piece of it was where in Judaism, where you say you're still highly traditional, but you don't keep kosher, you don't wear
kippah, yarmulke.
Yeah, yarmulke, and having that not be looked on as if you do that in any other religion, where I follow these tenets, but not. I feel like Judaism to me seems like, from the outside looking in, one of the only areas where you can have that and it's not looked down upon. Sure, there's also forces that want you to keep it because, like you said, it's a very steeped in tradition. They want to keep those traditions because they understand the importance of the tradition, where they come from. But to have it be understood that it's not a bad thing, that if you are still, they would look at the good of the tenets you do carry, outweigh the bad of the tenets that you don't. I feel like that is something that I've been looking for all the time. That's all I want. Just give me the value for what I am doing. Don't give me shit for the shit I'm not. That just blows my mind. And then, the fact that anyone can argue, even around the dinner table, I feel like that was something I struggled with, and has definitely put me in this spot, because I felt like ever since growing up, I was always the youngest child, and I always felt like I had big dreams and big things to say and big ideas, but I felt like my articulation was never up to the point where I could say it. And I feel like that's why I value articulation so much nowadays, because I can never do it. And I felt like that's what was withholding me, is like, when I learn to talk like an adult, when I know what's going on, and I can talk like these adults, then I'll be able to have my word heard, right? And I'll be able to talk at the dinner table and be held. And for that to be one of the core tenets of let everyone, let them ask questions, and it's encouraged. I feel like that is what nowadays draws me so close to it as well. And also, I think there's another big piece of self-accountability. And I think you also hold accountability in a high regard, but I do see that in not just you, but all these other intellectuals, comedians, that self-accountability is a huge tenet of you. I just didn't know how it was. And so many of the stories that you told really put a lot of keys into locks that I was, been fiddling with for a long time. And I just wanted to say thank you before we move on for that. And I'm sure after the podcast, or I'm sure you're going to be a guest on again, if I can convince you to give me another couple hours, and we can maybe dive into some more of those. But just wanted to not breeze past it, because I do feel like it was a very important thing for me, and you really helped me through a few things there. So that's awesome. Thank you.
No, man. Thank you for saying that. I would just add, and I think, whatever it is that we get through, I think it's good enough, because it means that we thought it had substance,
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that I wouldn't attribute it all to religion for the benefit of other religions, or for the benefit of parenting.
Yeah.
In this sense that, I do remember, even if all the people at the table were Jewish, that when we were young children, my parents would allow us to stay up and participate in a dinner that they hosted for their friends. My parents would allow us to, and this wasn't religion, this was parenting. My parents were that way. My parents would allow us to sit in the table with the adults. There wasn't a kids' table during a dinner at home. We never had that. My parents didn't believe in the kids' table. They were like, what do you mean the kids' table? This is the table. So they just made a bigger table and everyone sits in it. And when they were having a conversation about the creation of the world, or about the economy, or about airplanes, or about how to generate ink from natural sources into artificial machinery, and you had something to say, you were as key to the conversation, whether your input was actually valid or whatever it was. You were as key to the conversation as the expert who was invited that night to the table to speak about it, and your opinions counted. And I think one of the things my parents, I commend them for now, and there's many things in parenting that are good and bad, and you can look back and see, but one of the things I think they were amazing at is that they never said, "Oh, shut up! You're asking too many questions." They never said that, and that's a parenting thing.
Right.
You know, we were machines of questions. And why this? And why that? And why is the ceiling blue? And why is blue a color? And why is color the word? And why is color written with a C? And I think my father always had an answer. If he didn't, he would say, "I don't know, but let me find out," or he would explain something else. But I think it's about having the patience to sit with your children and with people to be able to provide answers to questions and not give up. Because the minute you cut someone off, I mean, you have no idea how many friends I have that tell their kids, "Stop asking questions, I'm busy." And that "stop asking questions, I'm busy" actually is limiting their mind, is limiting the ability to want to know more. I don't know, it might be a religious thing, or it might be from this religion, but I think it was also a parenting thing.
Yeah, and I see that, and I'm trying to keep that separated, right? The tools plus the people, right? Just like we said earlier with some other religions where people confuse the people and using these tools in bad ways to enact negative externalities, and you have to separate that. That's not the whole religion; that's some people within them. But I think also it doesn't give the full power to the people, in essence, right? I think that would be misappropriating to say that all those great things I just listed that we had a little conversation on are all tools of the Jewish faith and not your parent. I feel like that would discredit the work that your parents did to raise you like that. But I do think that there's certain pieces. It's almost when you can carry on tradition, that's when those things take effect, right? It's a feedback loop where there's certain tools and pieces of the religion that allow you to parent in a certain way and give them that freedom and those kind of things, which then kids grow up with and then reciprocate to their kid. They have that if they're given that patience of that, and just the tradition itself of having that keeps that going. And I feel like that is more so than the tools itself. It's the I feel like I'm making a realization you tried to get me to realize earlier, but I think until this moment I didn't. It's the tradition that's more important than the tools almost. It's the fact that if you can keep things going and keep these things that have worked out so far, it doesn't mean they're not perfect. We have to keep questioning. We have to keep having these discussions, right? Let's argue about this. Let's get to the best point. But if we keep leveling up and keep refining it downwards and downwards to getting better and better and pass that on to our kids so that they can raise their kids in the same way, it's just that evolution of always getting better. And I feel like that is what is missing from the world right now, is that ability to have those arguments and have that compassion for a good faith conversation with people. And I feel like maybe what I'm confusing as only hearing Jewish intellectuals answer the call for these being taken away lately, and more so maybe it's more important to them, because a lot of these things that I see missing from the world of having freedom to have a conversation and argue it wherever that goes, right, and all those things, with those being taken away, those are not something that were part of my upbringing, right? I was never raised on them. But if those were core to your being and those were what your whole religion and worldview is based in, and now people are starting to take them away, that would impact you so much more. And it's almost no surprise to me that those are the people speaking up right now against those and trying to keep nuance and logic and good faith conversation alive in the world. I feel like I was trying to make that connection of why they're the ones in the forefront of this fight. And I think I just now understand that, of where that's coming from.
Yeah, that's nice. That's interesting. I see it from your perspective also.
Yeah. So, I mean, not to make this all about me again, and I know I've already taken lots of your time here, so maybe we'll fast forward a bit. So you made your way to America. Maybe the next big thing we can talk about is Shoes for Africa. I know we discussed that, but you decided to take it upon yourself as a young kid at that point and make yourself accountable, say you're going to do this, and ended up making it happen. Was that, would you think that is your first step among maybe those three pillars, and setting yourself goals and being accountable for that? Or was that just the first time on the grand scale? Were you already doing that in your life up until that point? That was just the first one that I would have heard about. Or do you think that was the first time that you said, and if so, if that was the first time, do you think that was the first domino to fall in all your next steps that we'll get to?
I don't think it was the first. I think the first was, my father owned a furniture store.
Right.
And I used to work there every day after school. I liked it. I wasn't getting paid, but I enjoyed it very much. And I took it on as if it was my own business. I was 14, 13. Shoes for Africa, I started with a friend when we were 16. Maybe the summer of when we were 15 to 16, around there. Right. And this, I'm talking about like 2-3 years before. I was at my father's furniture store. I used to run the QuickBooks program. I had taken accounting in high school.
Yeah.
So I'm doing QuickBooks for all his sales. I'm recording them. And then I would help assemble furniture and do all these things. And one day this Italian guy walks in and starts looking through catalogs. And I was like, I found it weird. He didn't buy anything. So I got a bad feeling. Then he left, came back a week later, started looking through catalogs. Then he left. And then I told my dad, like, we shouldn't let that guy in the store anymore. So well, why not? And I said, I don't know. I feel like he's going through our catalogs. I was 14, maybe 13, probably 14. And I said, he's looking through our catalogs and writing stuff down and asking questions. And I really feel like he's going to like steal our products, like it's too much. And my dad's like, you're always mistrusting of people, bro, I was kidnapped. I ran away from a country, like, give me a break. Yeah. Like, yeah, I've got some background now. So I said, okay, fine. Let me be mistrusting. Now, keep in mind, my dad had allowed me to reach a level that I could question his business at the age of 13, 14, where we had a few fights when he said a few times, like, hey, fuck off. I'm the owner of this business and you're my child. Like, what are you talking about? You're not going to tell me how I'm going to price my product. Like, I was questioning him about pricing products. And he's like, hey, I would print reports from QuickBooks and be like, you're losing money because of this. We're paying too much money to this employee. And that's like, hey.
I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it.
I appreciate you and I love you for it, but back off, man.
Yeah.
So we had a few of those moments. It's not all flowery and roses. And I think those moments build you up. And that creates now your ability to generate answers, to set goals, because I was doing it through his business. I was allowing myself to set goals for the business through accounting, to generate answers about what's going on here. Why is this not working this way? How much do we pay? What's your margin? And when at the age of 13, 14, you get to be able to do that at an open scale. You're doing stuff. But then one day this Italian guy walks in and says, ciao, come stai? I'm opening a store near you down the street to sell furniture and kitchens, our competition, man. And I would like to invite you for the inauguration. And you could see my father turn as red as the cap, the logo on the cap you're wearing. Fume. And I was like, oh, he's going to explode. Like, I remember, I have no idea what that impact of a competitor, starting near us means. But I didn't even think of like, oh, remember I told you so? Like, that didn't come to my mind. My mind at the age of 14, it was more like, oh, shit. Like, it's going to explode. Yeah. So I see my dad fuming, and then I see him calm down, breathe in a little. Maybe he took his breathing classes you're referring to. And then, and then he tells the guy, do you have a website? And the guy says, a website? This is like a 60-year-old Italian guy, 2003, 2004. We're a year into moving in from Venezuela. I said, yeah, do you have a website? Now, keep in mind, Google hadn't even gone public at the time. They weren't even a public company. So the guy said, no, I don't have a website. He says, well, my son David here is one of the best web designers in the country. And he can make you a website. No, I don't. Listen, a website is your window into the world. You're paying rent and you have a window for your shop and that costs so much money, but for only this many square meters of window. Yeah. But my son can make you a window that is unlimited size. Anyone can see it from anywhere in the world. And I think he would charge you like $80, right? Mm-hmm. And the guy walks out and says, great, I'll call you tomorrow. You come over to my shop and you do it. And he took $80 and gave them to me. And he walked out. Man, I was furious. I mean, I respect my dad, so I stayed quiet to this whole bullshit of web design because I don't know how to make a website. And I said, what the hell are you talking about, man? I'm 14 years old. I don't even know how to make a website. He says, well, figure it out because you were the one who wanted to make business out of this guy. And now you're telling me, that was his payback way to me and to the guy, I think, in a way. You want to make money from this guy? Here's your opportunity. Here's your client, Yeah. And look, man, I got the money before I started. So now accountability is 100% in. It wasn't my fault. I didn't account. My father put me on the spot. And it's like this thing of sending shoes to Africa. I was told now I have to make a website. How the hell do you make a website, bro? I went on geocities.com. It was a product Yahoo had in the 1990s that I knew about because my father saw me use it once. And I tried to make a website with GeoCities. I went on register.com. Anyway, I ended up making the guy a website. And it took me 2 weeks. I uploaded some photos. It was crappy. You see it today and you're like, whatever. But I made that at the age of 13 or 14.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to develop the skills to put together a business plan for him and to develop what I wanted his website to be, the About Us page, the products page, the Contact Us page. I made sure no furniture was shown, only kitchens, because we didn't sell kitchens.
Yeah, there you go.
I made his website, and I told him, if you want me to change the photos, it's $20. Well, you pay me another $20 a month later to change the photos. A month later, I get a phone call from two people, different, that the Italian guy referred me to, that wanted me to make websites. And I told my dad, like, what the hell, man? Now I'm like a web designer. I don't even know how to do this. He said, hey, increase your price to $150. If they want you to do it, now you figure it out again, but it's worth it. So I made my price $150. Both people hired me. Before I knew it, I was hiring people at the age of 15 or 14 in the Philippines and in India over like websites. I would pay them through PayPal to make the websites for me. I would stay up till 2 a.m. And that was my first experience with accountability, is that now I had people expecting me to finish their website. I had to pay them. I had to generate answers. I had to figure out, how do I make these websites? What do I need to do? Where are the resources? And I was 15, man. I was trying to figure out how to hustle. And I ended up buying my first car with it. I had a few other jobs. Wow. When I was 15, I worked at the mall. Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, selling remote control cars on commission. I used my payment was $6 an hour or 20% of sales, whatever was higher. But if I sold $400, I'd make $80 that day for 5 hours work.
Yeah.
So I was doing that. I was working this was my summer of 15 before I developed Shoes for Africa. I was working every afternoon from 6 to 8 p.m. at the mall selling remote control cars, 2 hours. I picked that shift because that's when I thought people would go in the summer to the mall.
Yeah.
And between 1 and 5, it took me an hour to get to the mall. I worked at a law firm as a paralegal to understand immigration because I was angry at my immigration lawyer that we hadn't gotten our green card. So he said, oh yeah, come work for me. I'll pay you to do paralegal work, translations, but then you get to figure out how hard this is. And in the mornings, I was taking summer school to advance my math classes. And in the weekends, I was making websites. So, this was my 15 years of age summer. I had 2 jobs, a full-time pre-calculus course, and I was hustling to try to make websites.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of these experiences created a huge sense of responsibility in me, which I think is what you need in order to carry on accountability. Mm-hmm. But I think the website experience was really my first punch with, I have a deadline. I have to generate answers to make it happen. And I have to set these goals in order to get there. And I think at a very basic level, these 3 things I described in the TED Talk and these 3 things that I described to you through any experience we could talk about is exactly what school gives us. They give you homework. In homework, you need to set the goal to finish it. You have the accountability that it's due, and you have to generate answers literally in the homework. Yeah. And I think if you can just extrapolate that and practice it in school well when you're young, you can then carry it on to your work life, to your romantic life. And this is kind of how I saw it. I saw it always as a tool. Like school for me was a tool to how to get better at life. It wasn't like, I have homework to do. That's so annoying. It was more like, let me figure out how to do this so I can get shit done.
Yes, and I agree. And I think one of the issues that as of late that we're getting to is schools are becoming more, there's a lot of hand-holding too, and not a lot of, every school needs to be treating kids like adults, at least giving them that experience, because I feel like lots of people are going out into the world at 18 and have never been asked to be an adult in their life a day before that. And then every day after that, they're asked to be an adult. And it is this problem that we see unfolding every year. A new crop of 18-year-olds goes out into the world with the same situation. And then because we've infantilized our education system, and now the universities are having the same thing where it's a lot of, treating them like kids, which you are still a kid. If you're, under 40, you're pretty much a kid. Everyone's just trying to figure it out, like we said. But I feel like not giving people that opportunity, it sounds mean to put someone in that position, but it's giving them an opportunity. I was at 23 years old, 1 year out of university. I was dropped off in Grand Prairie, where I'm living now, with this operation I'm running now, and was told, figure it out. You're in a role that probably on average as a 40-year-old person is working in this role. but you're 23, figure it out. You're a bright kid, right? They told me, no, we'll be there the first 2 weeks. We'll help you out through everything. And then the day before we started, they said, no, we're going back to our hometown. You're on your own. Figure it out. And I learned so much. And same as you, I was upset and what are they doing and all this? But just now am I starting to realize the importance and what that did for me and the lessons that you learned. I think that's why when I first watched your TED Talk to get more idea of where you came from, when I heard your 3 tenets, it was, I know exactly where you got those. I know exactly what those mean to you, even further than how you're describing. That's why I was so excited to have you on, because I knew that we had come up to a lot of the big realizations in our life that drive us. I figured we had come to in at least similar paths to get there. And both in that situation, it was my father doing the same thing. He was my boss in that situation that left me like that and told me to figure it out. And he was probably my biggest mentor and one fall into business and very similar to your path. But hearing that makes a lot more sense. When I first heard that you decided you're going to ship all these shoes to Africa with no way of doing it, I thought, oh man, just putting myself in your shoes at 16 before going through that realization of what power you have in yourself to make these things happen. But once you've already had a taste of that, then you're off to the races for everything from there. And I think that's an amazing story to have that occur to you at 14 and have that lesson be ingrained in you at 14, where lots of people don't learn that till they're 30, till they're 35. Sometimes you don't get thrown into the deep end where you're sink or swim and make that realization of just what you can do. You follow the easy path, and you could be 50 years old and take your first leap into that pool and learn those lessons for the first time and have only, maybe 30 years left if you're lucky to really capitalize with that knowledge. But if it can happen to you at 14, or if we can find a way to ingrain this into our school system where kids are learning this at 10, 12, 6, from the day they start to walk, they could be knowing this. Go ahead.
There is another way. I mean, this is all one thing, but there's another thing that needs to go hand in hand with this, which we're missing out in early educations, which is there need to be winners and losers always.
Yes.
And
yes.
There's a famous baseball player, my favorite baseball player. His name is Ozzie Guillen. He used to be the manager of the White Sox. He played for the White Sox for over a decade. And, he won the world championship for the White Sox. He won the world championship for the Marlins as a third base coach. And he had an amazing career. And I actually know him personally, very fortunately, through my family and later when I lived in Chicago. So I spent quite a bit of time with him. And one of the things he told me, he says, and his language is quite colorful. So
colorful, there you go.
So I can't exactly, I'll paraphrase what he said, but he said, what's messed up about the world is that you go to a little league game today and every little freaking kid walks out with a golden trophy. Everyone who played the little league. And I think that's messed up. I personally think so. What he was trying to tell me is that we need to have winners and losers, and you need to learn to lose, and you need to be able to taste the dirt, and you need to be able to feel at an early age so that it's not disruptive when you lose at 18. Because that's what's happening now, is that we lose at 16, we lose at 18, we fail, we don't know how to get things done, and we think the world is over. We've never lost before. I was a winner my whole life. How did I lose now? You need to learn to lose. They say in America or in the North America, fail early so you can win big. But fail early also means to lose in the little league game. It also means to not win the spelling bee. Not everyone gets a diploma for winning the spelling bee. Only one guy, the one or girl, the one who was the better one, the smarter one. It doesn't matter. And we also should look out for the people who lose constantly to help them out so that they're not losing too much. But stop making everyone a winner. And I think I lost so many times. We don't have podcasts about all our failures. We have podcasts about the things that worked well. But I've lost elections in student government. I've lost in business. I've lost in transactions. I've lost in a relationship. I've lost in hitting on a woman. In so many things we lose. And the only way to really taste victory is to know how sour and how salty losing can be. And that flavor, the whole idea of tasting failure talks about when you fall in the dirt and you can taste the dirt. That's how you know you've tasted failure.
Yes. And what I see as an issue is it's like we think by not letting children lose when they're young, they will never experience loss. But it doesn't matter how many times you win or lose, you're going to keep losing. You're never going to not lose. There's going to be times, there's no Superman out there that never loses. But we're creating a society of people that have never learned to lose, and you didn't learn to lose when you're a young kid, when you can, have that stick with you. And now there's a whole generation of people that when they do lose, they turn to all these tools that you learn in sports or business that can teach you how to use that as motivation. They turn to self-pity, and they just turn to, blaming anybody or anything but themselves. And I think that is what the key tenet of the opposite side of this are, that people are taking into religions, is they're treating that as a religion, as nothing's my fault. It's always something else. There's always some other reason that this wasn't my fault, and that becomes their identity. That becomes their reason, because they never learn to lose. They never learn to take it. And that is what's so scary, is now that is becoming a problem. And their solution, instead of when people question them on that, their solution is not to argue back with them. It's to label them as not understanding, discompassionate. You don't understand what I've been through, and turning it down. But like you said, you have to make sure you come with that compassion at all times, so that you have the ability, when you do have to say something dispassionate, that it can land, and they can't just label you with that. If you can show that throughout your entire life you are working with compassion and trying to keep that both sides of the fence happy, then when you say something, you have the power, and they can't just label you like that. But it seems like that is going away slowly, and it doesn't matter how much you coach it in. Of course I understand A, B, and C, but I still think you need to, take a little bit of self-accountability. Sure, those are all valid reasons of why this is difficult for you, but if you can't at least start by saying, this is where I went wrong, plus all these other things that maybe made it a little harder, you're never going to make sure you're functioning at the highest level that you could. And that's what that's what I see as needing to change, and needs to change quickly, because it's ramping up and becoming so widespread and entering into new. It used to be you'd only kind of see that kind of, and I think it's we're seeing it because it's growing with the generations that grew up with that no losing as a child. Then you go into universities. Now the universities are all tailored to that of nothing's ever your fault. We'll hold your hand through the whole thing. You don't have to work hard. If you want to, you can work hard. And those lessons are there to be learned, but it's on you to. And if you want to just take the easy path, like they've been, what's going to make you decide? If you've been having the easy path, have your hand held all through high school, and then you get to university and there's two paths, an easy way and a hard way. What's going to make you take the hard way when the easy way is still there and you can get your hand up so you continue on? Then you enter the workforce, and you're going to look for an entry into the workforce that's easy and doesn't expect a lot of you. And that is what that big shift between chasing our dreams and losing our dreams, right? It's taking that easy path at each step, but it's got to start early, so people have that understanding. These lessons need to be instilled at a young age, so that we don't have this fallout of all these dominoes that have fallen from a small change at an early age to this. They get to an age where they're 25, 26, and that toolkit is missing. That internal toolkit we talked about earlier is missing a key piece, right? They don't have a hammer, they don't have a wrench, they don't have these basic abilities that you need to be successful. And that is what I see, that not enough people ringing the alarm bells about that. And kind of taking it back to the religious thing, the first people that ever brought this were all Jewish intellectuals that brought this current problem to my mind state of how much I value it now. And it makes all the sense in the world that a lot of those principles are actually have a basis in the religious, in the Jewish faith itself. And that's probably what they started fighting against, and now see that it's grown into, it's way bigger than that now. That on a small scale, that's an issue, but now it's grown out of control, and you see it everywhere, top to bottom in society.
Yeah, look, in a way, I mean, separate from the religious part of the religion, immigrating is failing because you failed at where you are in many ways, and you want to go start over, and you're willing to try it again, and you're willing to do it once more,
right?
To give it a shot. And I think it's not a negative thing, but in many ways, when you move to a new country, when you try something new, you're admitting that it didn't work in the other place, and that you're willing to try over. Whether you won in the general spectrum of the time you were there, when you're going to a new place, you come with this, what I said before, with this amount of energy that should probably be harvested, because it's the kind of energy that says, second chance, try again. I'm willing. I failed, but I can do it again anyway. I can get up. And it's not only about Jews who migrated when they were expelled from countries. It's about the Mexicans who are crossing the border to the United States, to be honest, or the Namibians who are coming to Canada, or the Libyans who are swimming to Egypt, to Italy. These are people who want to try harder, who failed, who want to do it again. Yeah. And those are people who have the courage with what it takes to get things done. By the way, I have a croissant in my hand. I hope it doesn't bother you. I don't.
No, of course. I can't expect you not to eat if I'm going to make you sit here for however long we've been going, 2.5 hours here. And like I said, I've been going for 2.5 hours, and we've gone to your high school, and you've done so many things, and we haven't even got to. I had so many questions about Namibia and what you're doing there. So maybe we can just pick up the pace. Maybe stop along the way of your how you got to Namibia from high school. Where was the first place you went to university? Because I know you studied at a handful of intellectual powerhouse schools.
So when I was a junior in college, I mean, one of my dreams was I need to go to Harvard when I was
Right.
a child.
Mm-hmm.
I actually bet with one of my parents' friends that I'll study at Harvard, $100. I think I was 9 years old. I told her $100 I'll go to Harvard. She's like, down. You'd never
Yeah.
go there. You're in Venezuela. You're never gonna get there. You don't speak English, kid. Um, so I did go there.
Yeah.
I actually took 8 credits at Harvard. I studied economics in 2007, and I was still in high school. So I got into a program that allowed you to take courses at Harvard with Harvard professors, even if you hadn't graduated high school. I applied, somehow I got in, and I spent a semester there.
Mm-hmm.
I took classes at Florida International University and Miami-Dade College while I was in high school. So as a high school student, I was going to university classes at university campuses in Miami, and I was
Mm-hmm.
very fortunate because my high school got to pay for it. So I,
Nice.
at a very when I was in 10th grade, I was already going to college at the same time. So I took a college entrance exam. I passed the grade level, and they
Mm-hmm.
allowed me to. So I took biology in Miami Dade College. I took international relations at FIU, and I took 2 economics courses at Harvard, all while I was in high school. So I was a registered student in these places. But I ended
Right.
up getting a scholarship to go study at the University of Chicago. I was extremely fortunate. The scholarship program
Mm-hmm.
actually allowed me to attend. My parents wouldn't have been able to afford a university in the US.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really, there's not a day that goes by that I don't thank heavens, if whatever that means, for having been able to attend a good university.
Right.
Um, I would say at the University of Chicago, I studied economics. It was very difficult. Sorry, I'm just trying to make sure my laptop is plugged in
Yeah. No.
so
Of
that it
course.
doesn't
Of course.
die.
Yeah. And
Um,
the University of Chicago is probably my favorite school in the states. Not that I know too much about it, but a lot of my favorite economists have come out of there, and it always holds a soft spot in my heart. So if you're going to study economics, that's a place to do it.
that's right. Actually, it's funny you say that. When I was applying to when I was in 9th grade, 10th grade, I used to tell my dad I want to go to Harvard, and he used to say, "No, man. If you want to study economics, you got to go to Chicago." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Nobody's heard of that. That's the city." And he goes, "No, no, no." And if you actually Google it, the Chicago Boys is a group of guys who did their PhD in economics under Milton Friedman at the
Yeah.
University of Chicago, and they were sent from Chile by Pinochet, and they actually went. They were called the Chicago Boys. There's probably a Wikipedia page on them. They
Mm-hmm.
flew back to Chile and they reformed the entire economy and privatized it and liberalized it under the Chicago mindset. And today, Chile is one of the most advanced economies in the world. I lived
Wow.
in Chile for a year. If I fast forward, my time in Chicago was amazing. I made some amazing friends,
Mm-hmm.
Latinos, Americans, Africans, Europeans. It was a melting pot of cultures. Asians,
Mm-hmm.
sorry, I didn't know one of the biggest
Yeah.
ethnicities in the school. It gave me an amazing perspective. It also, I learned a lot outside of school. We
Yeah.
built a stadium in Little League,
Yes.
baseball Little League in Canaryville.
Mm-hmm.
We did a program for Pakistan. I helped some friends when they were building TEDx, which we actually created TEDx at University of Chicago.
Oh wow.
I was one of the people helping, but not the creator. I was involved in so many things, just like I was in high school. But one of the fortunate things I had that defined me a lot was that in university, I got an internship at Google from my first year.
Wow.
And that's a whole story of its own, how I managed to
Yeah.
get that
Yeah.
because they interviewed for seniors graduating. But I didn't know that. I thought I was going for a coffee chat. And I show up
Yeah.
to this thing and they're like, "Why are you here?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm here for a coffee chat." And, I'm like, "No, this is an interview. But it was an amazing opportunity. Somehow I knew a lot about um, about
Business
Google's
structure.
products.
Yeah.
Well, no, because I made websites. So I
Mm-hmm.
told my clients AdWords, and I managed it for them, and I was making websites even before Google was public. So I
Yeah.
was using AdWords before Google was a powerhouse.
Mm-hmm.
And the interviewer had no idea about half of the products that I used. I mean, I used Google Analytics in 2004, 2005, whenever it was being created. So for her, it was like that product wasn't beta, like now their businesses cannot survive without Google Analytics. So I was very fortunate. I got that job. It opened my mind into commercial world. One of the most important transformative experiences I had during my time in university was my first review session at Google, my 360-degree evaluation, where a person actually sits you down and tells you what's wrong with you. And I remember before walking into my review session, I called my dad. I told you my dad was like my best friend, my support mechanism, everything. I called him and I said, "Hey, man," and that's how we speak. I said, "Hey, man, I'm about to walk into this review session. I don't know what the heck it means because in your head you're perfect. So I'm like, I'm about to walk into this review session. You have any advice?" Now, the review session is literally this is structured in a way that your direct manager sits you down. Right. And for those people who may be listening that actually, maybe even you, that never worked in like the corporate world without family and without anything. Yeah. Man, the corporate world is super structured. And whoever thinks that you need to go be an entrepreneur and not try out working for someone is wrong. I mean, like a lot of the reasons why I was able to be an entrepreneur at an early age after college, like on my own, not working for my dad and stuff, actually properly be an entrepreneur now, is that I had corporate experience. Even if it wasn't for 10 years, but at least 3 to 4 years corporate experience during college, plus 3 years after graduating of corporate experience, where I learned to respect hierarchy, even if I didn't like it, where I learned to compose emails, even if I didn't know how to, where I learned how to speak in a meeting and when is my turn based on hierarchy and based on my thoughts and based on my responsibility. Like there's a lot that you pick up on outside of the normal day-to-day work. And at Google, one of the things they had was a review session where they sit you down and they tell you the negative feedback and the positive feedback from every team member and what they think about you. And they highlighted. And before I walked in, I called my dad. I said, "Man, do you have any advice?" And he said, "Yes, I have one piece of advice, and hear me carefully." And he said, "Your whole childhood, whenever we criticized you, you took it offensively. Like you took offense to the criticism. So watch out, man. You're about to go into your first corporate." My dad didn't come from corporate like I was about to. He kind of had the experience in his 50 years of life at the time, 55, whatever, to say, watch out, because if you react to feedback the way you've been reacting to feedback while we brought you up, you're going to do very bad in that place. Yeah. And you love interrupting and you love talking. So listen to the feedback, breathe after the lady's done to make sure that she's actually done. And then if you finish breathing and she didn't say another word, then you can talk. And what I would recommend is don't fight it, say thank you. Don't fight the feedback like you've done your whole life. Now, I go into that room, man, 19 years old, I'm working at a massive corporation. I'm making $20,000, $30,000 for the summer, which is a lot of money. Yeah. Still is, by the way. So it's a lot of money for a 2-month job. Like it's killer money. And you're sitting there. This lady, I can promise you, Nick, she told me 12 things that, I mean, positive things were great. Yeah, I forget. I never remembered them.
Yeah, you only remember the negative.
She told me 12 things or 17, I don't even know how many, and none of them were news to me. All the things she told me that I could improve on, that I could work on, things that she's highlighting that are bad, you could pick them out of a hat of messages my parents have given me over the years, right? Now, anything from your communication, from how what you always think what you have to say is the most important, so you kind of interrupt and you speak your mind always, or we never know whether you're busy or you're available. I mean, bro, she just listed things where I thought, why am I even working at this place? Like this is horrible. What a horrible candidate. Now, I did what my father said. I breathed, I listened, I waited, and then I said, "Thank you so much." And then she frowned. And then Cynthia Garda was my manager's name. I remember the lady because it's like the first person to ever give me feedback officially. And she goes, what do you mean, thank you? And I said, "No, thank you for taking the time. Thank you for really like valuing I value the opportunity and the time that you've given to to study how I can be better. And I've written it all down, and I have a few questions. Can you give me an example of when I did this? And can you give me an example when I did that? Because I really want to better it. And I took to heart strategically, by the way, I'm not, let's not be naive, but I took to heart what my father told me. I used it as a strategy. I went into that room. I picked up the feedback. I absorbed it. I said, thank you. I walked out. The lady was frowning the entire time. Like she couldn't believe, especially given how much negative feedback she had to give me, that I was so appreciative of it. Mm-hmm. When I finished my internship at Google, I had $10,000 bonus in the bank that they sent me a check of a month later. They said I was the highest improve in the internship from feedback to final.
Because of how you took it.
Because of how I took the message I'm telling you the whole thing, I don't even know if I actually improved as much. Yeah. Obviously, I took it to heart because I had a month of performance after that to still show that I could improve. Because they told you, if you don't improve, we don't hire you again. And they hired me again, and I came back. But the bonus that they gave me is just to highlight how important and how that was great money. I was able to help my parents with it and my brothers and stuff. And, it made a big difference in my life. It filled the hole. But it just shows you how important feedback is, how important giving feedback is to people, how important receiving the feedback and what you do with the feedback. I was definitely not the best intern at Google that summer, by no means. I mean, I was 19. I was one of the youngest kids that ever worked at that company. I was probably the youngest kid that's ever worked officially I was still, a high schooler, if you wanted to see it like that, But I think it was this idea that they only cared about the fact that I was able to take the feedback. And that I took with me through my 7-8 years working in corporate throughout college and after when I graduated. And when I graduated, I went to work for a bank. And when I worked at a bank, I was the worst, man. I had no idea about accounting. I had no idea about finance. I got my way to the bank. You know what I mean? Yeah. I found a way to the bank because I wanted to learn how money works, because I had this idea, I want to go to Africa and do something. I didn't know where in Africa. I didn't know how. I didn't know what. But I knew something, which, we've been talking about a toolbox, was if I don't know how money works, and this was something that a mentor told me, if I don't know how money works, what it means to raise debt, what it means to structure equity, what it means to create a cash flow analysis, a balance sheet. Yeah. And I didn't learn it in school. I hated learning things that I couldn't use. So I didn't take class. I studied economics, not accounting or finance. Mm-hmm. And I thought, if I don't put myself in a position to generate these answers that I need, to generate how this works, if I don't force myself into it, I'll never learn it. Right. And I think when you graduate college, one of the most important things you can do is put yourself in a position of discomfort, not comfort. Right. When I was at Google, it was so comfortable. That's why I ran away. Not ran away. I would love to tell you I've been working at Google for the last 15 years. Yeah. But one of the things that could have been improved about my internship, if ever anyone from Google hears this, is that I didn't get enough responsibility. Right. I didn't get enough challenges in my roles that made me feel the discomfort of growth. You only grow with discomfort. Your muscle, I'm not even very muscular, but athletic people will tell you that your muscles are growing when it hurts, when it pains, when you're uncomfortable, when your back is bothered in the morning. It's the same with your brain, man, and it's the same with your skill set. It only grows when it's uncomfortable. Yeah. And at Google, I didn't feel that. We had some amazing benefits, good pay, and some amazing challenges that the company was solving. But as an employee on the business side, I wasn't seeing that. So I think when I went to finance and I realized I had no idea what I was doing, I said, I'm home. This is it. Yeah, I'm here to learn. And I would spend nights till 2 a.m. I worked in debt capital markets, which was, as soon as it became easier, I found a way to shift. And then I moved to investment banking, and I worked in mergers and acquisitions. I had to create financial models to decide how a power plant would be added to the valuation of a company that had 16 power plants, and how does another company buy a company that has 16 power plants? How do you value those together? How do you raise capital for it? All in Excel. And I used Excel to make a list for attendance during meetings. That's all I knew about it. So I think these were a bit of my high-level experiences, and this dream I had objectively of I want to go to Africa. How do I get there? Let me learn about finance. And then I spent a bit of time traveling. Yeah, I went to Nigeria, I went to Angola, and eventually I told my boss, and this is about accountability. and setting goals. Like everyone in my company knew I wanted to move to Africa, but it was such a weird thing that it was okay to say it. You know, like you can't tell your girlfriend you're looking for another girl because she'll break up with you, and you can't tell your job that you're looking for another job because they'll break up with you.
Yeah.
But if you tell your girlfriend that you're thinking of taking some time off in a beach alone, she's not gonna think you're looking for another girl. She thinks like, wow, this guy's a bit crazy, wants to take time alone in a beach. Like, I don't mind it. Like, go ahead, do it. Just keep talking about it. And the day you want to do it, we'll have a serious conversation because you can't take time off from our relationship. And this is, I'm extrapolating this to relationships because it's the same way it works with the job. I told my boss, hey man, I'm thinking of moving to Africa. And to him, that was like, this guy's nuts, but he didn't see it as a threat of like, this guy's quitting us to go to the competition. So then they offered me this opportunity to move to Santiago, to Chile, the home of the Chicago Boys we were just discussing. Yeah. Because he said, you want to be because he asked me, and this is the whole thing about accountability, is that, I'm trying to get somewhere. I'm setting my goals. And I told my boss, hey, I'm moving to Africa. I'm moving to Nigeria. I want to start a commercial bank there with a family. And he was like, hey man, like, you're crazy. Why? Nigeria is dangerous. And why would you want to go there? And it's so far away. And you're some white Jewish kid. Like, you won't even fit in. And I said, like, because I want to be entrepreneurial and I want to have an impact. And he took those two messages and he said, well, we're opening an office in Santiago, Chile. And the guy who was supposed to go told me that it's either him, that his wife said it's either the bank or her, but not both. She cannot move with him to Santiago. So the opening is there. Do you want to move there? And I immediately said, 100%. Because life gives you opportunities. And, we said earlier, like, tell everyone where you're headed so they cannot push you in the wrong direction. But sometimes taking maybe where you're headed is not where you'll end up. That's the other thing. Be willing to rewrite your plan. And I think that's something that is key. I mean, like, don't be so hard-minded, like, no, it's got to be this way or no way, Life will show you hiccups.
And I think one thing that has definitely I found so far, and maybe you'll feel the same way, is all it takes is for you to, once you're on that path and you know that path and you feel about it, these opportunities almost start to fall in place of you, and you have it's a weird feeling. And it's, to bring it back to you, I had this weird feeling about you of, oh, this is something special. I need to pursue this. I know it's not directly related to this goal I want to get to over here, but this is somewhere, this is a stop off I need to go. And it's just this weird gut instinct that pulls you there. And it all seems to, it makes sense. You can't articulate it to other people, but it all makes sense to you in the path that you're on, because nobody knows that path. Nobody knows all the inputs and what you've been through to get you there. And that's what I found. So that's why I was so pestering at you, because I could see these things that I knew, oh, this is a big step. I think I could have some big realizations. And it's so funny that some of the ones and some of the things I thanked you for was these big ones that I've been struggling with for weeks and weeks now. And just one conversation where you get to this point and you can get there, and you don't know exactly how it's going to help you, but you can feel it. And I just wondered, once you started getting on this path, or I guess it happened to you at a young age, of going to Africa, maybe you're so far into this and I'm just feeling it for the first time. Maybe that's why I'm so into you. Probably this is old hat for you, but of just learning, it is a skill to learn and recognize those pieces when something inside you speaks and says, oh no, don't ignore this, take this on, or oh, don't ignore this person, make sure you build a relationship there, and learning to listen to that and following it and just seeing where the results take you.
Yeah, look, I still struggle with it.
Yeah, of course.
I'm saying I might have given you a few pointers, and these conversations are amazing because it helps me also be retrospective and try to identify things, and I'll be pensive for the next week about like, oh, did I say that because is that how it is for me? I mean, I'll struggle and play with it in my head to continue writing my own narrative. But look, man, here I am sitting in my office. Sometimes I'm at 12 at night on a Saturday here thinking like, how am I going to make my goals come true? Like, am I doing the right thing? I want to build more houses. I want to start a financing thing where I can give mortgages. Like when we started the podcast, I flipped to my phone because I got a message from the lady who runs the African Union for Housing Finance asking me, hey, do you want to have a webinar where you speak with a few guys and we can all discuss together how to structure more loans? But here's the imposter syndrome. I've given 3 house loans. These guys are all running massive banks with billions of dollars in their portfolio. What am I going to go speak to them about? And I'm thinking like, why am I on the webinar? And it's like, because my passion and my energy says I want to be part of the group of people that give loans. But the reality, man, is I'm not giving loans yet, and I want to give loans. And it's something I see myself doing. And And, in my head, I think I'm headed in that direction. But, you were saying, oh, this guy's figured it out. Like, I want to convey that I haven't,
No, yeah.
I figured out how to build houses, but when I got here, I hadn't. And, sometimes one of my brothers, Sammy, who works with me, says like, I'm not an expert in warehouse construction. And I look at him and I say, me neither. Like, and we look at each other and we're in a room and we're in charge of like a $1 million warehouse. And we look at each other and we say, holy smokes. He looks at me like, you're not an expert? I was like, hey man, I grew up with you. Like, where did you see, when did you hear I became an expert in warehouse construction? Like, we're just figuring this out. Life is about problem solving. Construction is about problem solving. There's not one industry out there, unless you're in like the sciences and the academics of figuring out medicine and stuff. But when you're in management, there's nothing about it that is not just about problem solving. And giving out loans, I see it as a problem solving thing, and I'm going to try to figure it out. And I'll keep hustling and struggling and investing my time and energy towards putting those things together. Yeah. Just like you, my brother, have come up with a podcast. And I'm looking at you through this screen and I see you with professional headphones, professional microphones, the right hat. Like, if you didn't share your story and your context, I think I'm sitting here with a guy who's been doing podcast interviews for the last 15 years and I'm just following your lead. And the truth is that you're saying from your perspective, hey, am I doing the right thing? Is this podcast working? Am I making it last the right amount of time? Are we having the right conversation? That's in your head, bro. In my head, I'm looking at you and I'm saying, hey, I'm here with a professional podcast interviewer. We're launching. This is the right thing. And it doesn't matter that it's episode 6. It could be episode 600. I have the same impression because I'm sitting on the other side. And that's the same feeling that people I build houses for have. Mm-hmm. That's the same feeling that people I'm going to give home loans have. It's this guy gives home loans. Doesn't matter how long he's been in the game. You know?
Oh, that's so amazing. And I think the quicker we can get people to that realization that all it is problem solving. At the end of the day, everything is just problem solving if you're willing to put in the effort to solve the problems and not wait for answers to come to you. I think that was probably of everything I heard from you. Just not waiting for answers to come to you might be the single shortest but most impactful thing I heard, because I feel like that's the biggest difference. Everyone tries to solve problems, or everyone thinks they're trying to solve problems, but a lot of people's only way they know how to solve problems is wait for answers to come to them. That is their idea of solving problems. To them, that is solving problems. But really, the mindset shift that needs to happen is that isn't solving problems. That is waiting for answers to come to you. And I think that understanding is really what is missing from a lot of the world. And I think, like you say, you only grow when you flexibility, when you look at the muscles. But I think that everybody gets a trophy is almost puts a cast on everybody because it doesn't allow you to grow. Right? You're not giving that space. And I think that's that's so special, and it's nice to hear that, because that is how I feel. It's funny to have that dichotomy of that one side of yourself is that extreme confidence of, I feel like I'm amazing at podcasting and I've been listening to podcasts so much that it should feel like I've been doing this for 15 years when I go in there. But then you have that other side of the coin where you feel, who is anybody going to listen to me? What do I have to say? And it's that constant battle of between those two. But the way I've seen it is, it doesn't matter what you feel or how you're going, even to the amount of how it comes off, as long as you keep doing it. As long as you keep trying, you're going to get better at it. And it doesn't matter what point, whether you're at that spot where you think you sound like shit, or if you're at that spot where you think you really have it figured out. You're somewhere in between that, obviously. You're never going to be one side or the other of that coin. It's the two sides that's trying to drag you to make sure that you are consciously keeping those two in check, because that is what you need to go forward. You have to keep that humility of, there's a reason everybody has imposter syndrome. It's an evolutionary trait that keeps everything going, keeps you moving forward. It's very important, but you have to keep a handle on it. You can't let it run you. And then the other side of it is that wild ego of, I can do anything. I can change the world. I can be the biggest podcaster. Look out, Joe Rogan, I'm coming. I'm going to be a $600 million deal with Spotify, right? That's the other side. That's definitely well within me. And I feel like it's very embarrassing to me, and I always try and keep it hidden. But that also is a very big part of who I am. And I think I need to learn, and like you say, you're always learning this, but learning to find that balance between those two. And neither are bad. Imposter syndrome isn't bad. It's very important. You just have to understand what it is. And that ego of that thing, it isn't bad. You just need to keep it in check, and always walking that line between the two. And I'm sure you see that yourself, as sometimes it feels like, what am I doing? I don't know what I've got going on here. And then the next day is that I'm going to change the world. I'm going to, really make an impact for people that really need me right now. And I think that's a constant roller coaster, and everyone just needs to know that everyone's on that same ride. Everyone thinks they're looking around and all these rides everyone's on the same goddamn ride. That's
Nick. I have bad days, man. I have days where I wake up and I'm like, this is not working, and I'm going to go to bed, and I stay till 10. And those days are cool, man, because then at 10, I wake up later, and then I have another shower, and I have a coffee. And I show up to the office, and then sometimes reality kicks, and I'm like, all right, here's all these people working in my dreams, on my dreams as well. Like, why was I sleeping till 10? Like, let's go. And then I come back in, and sometimes it takes a coffee and a few hours off. And anyone who thinks that winning at life and winning at your dreams is the only way to go, you have to fail sometimes. You have to lose. You will have hiccups. You will have problems come up. You will have, and if you don't, it's quite annoying, because it's like you're just all the time accomplishing, and it's like, who's testing you? You need to be tested. Your dreams need to be tested. Your abilities need to be tested. It's the only way to grow. It's about this discomfort thing we've explained. And I think when I had that podcast with the hybrid people, the hybrid unlimited, like one of the things that they discuss is that it takes pains to work. I mean, our podcast wasn't about working out. I think they are in the industry and they do a lot about that stuff. But they were talking about, like, if it doesn't hurt, you're not growing. And life is not only about growing. It's kind of very cliche to say that we have to be growing all the time, but you're going through it. And in order to go through it and be better at it the next time and feel more satisfied with what you're doing, you have to fail a little sometimes. You have to go through those hiccups.
Definitely. And I think that's a great way to look at it, is when you are growing, it's going to feel great and it's going to feel terrible along the way. But if you're not growing, it's going to feel bad. And that for certainty. And you're not going to feel good if you're not growing. And I think that is that big issue of, you see these people that are turning to drugs and alcohol because they don't feel happy because they're not growing. But then it just turns into a cycle where they're not allowing themselves to grow because they aren't. Instead of trying to make a change, they're just turning to something else, taking the easy way, just like everything else that we're starting to teach people that is the easiest path to go. And they just have that easily right here. You could make a change, you could make it difficult, or you can just go down this easy path. I think that's what it is it's the lack of growth and lack of that's not even it's lack of conscious growth, of trying to grow. It's not even about, it's less about the fact of if you're growing or not. It's about trying. And it's impossible to try and grow and not grow. You're just, by the essence of how things work, that's just not how it works. But I feel like that's what people are so afraid of, is that if they try and grow, they're going to fail. But growing is not something you can fail at. As long as it's the effort, it's just about getting up every day and going back to that grind. That's what's important about it in itself. And I think if people can have that realization, that's what's going to be able to help people that are in some of those situations where it seems hopeless and it seems like drug and alcohol is the only response you can have. It seems pretty rational. And in all honesty, if you can put yourself in their mind, it's not an irrational decision as much as it might seem so from the outside. But if they can realize that all it takes, you don't need to be successful. You just have to try at it, right? And it doesn't have to be a big business venture. It could be, trying to walk 2 kilometers every day, or trying to learn to knit, or trying to do something. As long as you are in some way trying to better yourself, that is the first step to happiness. And I think that is a message that needs to be, shouted from the rooftops, from as many places as possible, because that's the only thing that I can see that really actionably combats the big issues that are afflicting society today. And I think they all stem back to that one issue, right? And I think that's that's maybe the best way I can think to combat it. I think that's all these times people have asked me what my podcast is about, but I don't have a little 2 cents to say that is what it's about, really. And that's what I'm trying to cultivate and have people on to get to. But I don't yet. I don't want to say I will never be able to, because I think eventually I will be able to articulate that in a nice compact sentence. I'm just not there yet. But I want people to listen, and that's why it has to be 3 hours to get to that point. That's what people really need to resonate with. And I think the only way to do that is to have long form conversation with somebody where they come along for this journey and they get to see both of us, go through the ups and downs and admit some things about ourselves that aren't exactly following that, what everyone else is showing on social media, just the highs and the highs and the highs. Show a little bit of lows, give them the compassion, so that these words that we're saying do have some impact. We're told by so many people that we have no input into whether we want to hear them or not. You're always saying, whether it's teachers, whether it's media that's just around you, you're being told messages from people that you didn't choose, and they're sending these messages that are easy to glob onto. But when you make a choice to listen to something, that is the first step to making a choice to bettering yourself, and that is the first step to happiness. And I know we didn't get to Namibia and all the things you're doing there, and that kills me because I have so many questions about it, and I did so much research and watched movies on Africa itself. But I think that just means I'm going to have you on again, and we just did a 3-hour primer to talk about what you're doing today, and then I think next time we can really dive into what it is you're doing, because I think you're making a huge impact. And maybe if you want to just, with however much time you want to take, you can send us off here with just a little bit of breakdown of what you've seen coming to Namibia, some of the bigger changes you've had, and the impact you're trying to make. And then next time we can hop deeper into it. How's that sound?
No, that's amazing. No, I appreciate it, and I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that the people that will actually get hooked to your podcast see the value that you're bringing, which is having open, sincere conversations, very free, very available to the mind. It's you're exploring. This is what you're doing. You're exploring thoughts. You're exploring feelings. You're letting people from different walks of life come together and really. Give their thoughts on what they're hearing, and then kind of let them go with the flow as any conversation would, without any restrictions of where to go. And I think that's quite nice. I appreciated that. I've enjoyed that part of the conversation. So that's I think great. Listeners will too. Look, I came to Namibia 2014 for the first time. I've had a lot of ups and downs. I've had a big adventure here. I came originally with investors, started up a company, made a lot of mistakes, got played, started over, restructured. So I think a lot of what we could kind of highlight about what we could speak again is, what it was like to feel like I was going to become an entrepreneur, and then kind of realizing that I was still being managed by investors and being managed by other people who wanted me to run a company in the way they wanted. And then from there, how I actually took the foremost step of venturing on my own into creating a venture from scratch. What I saw in Namibia when I decided to come here was not my culture, not my people, not my traditions, not my music, not my food, but an opportunity to be in a place that was so different, so unique from everything I knew, to try to create things that I thought were still needed, which were ratified by the markets, right? Like, I didn't come here to say, let me build houses even though people don't want them. I heard the outcry for houses. The private sector was not doing much. The public sector had failed. And there was a gap, a window in at the time that allowed me to say, maybe I can go try it. And it's a small country. It's about 2.5 million people in the entire country. Yeah. So, and it was a peaceful country. It was a beautiful country. I had visited 4 or 5 other countries in Africa. And I think one of the pulling factors for me, other than its uniqueness, was the idea that I could really try things out, that I wouldn't have to be really afraid of failing, because not a lot of people were doing it. Nobody was watching, right? Like, nobody was watching that I grew up with, kind of thing. Yeah. And it wasn't about not being accountable. It was the opposite. It's about this. My whole life, I've wanted to be unique. Not in an aggressive way, like, oh, I need to be this and I need to wear that, but more of like, I wanted my dreams and goals to not feel like I was pushed by society into this corner of, you need to be this, you need to be a lawyer, you need to do a teacher, you need to do that. I'm happy to be a lawyer or a teacher, but at my own way, in my own pace. Yes. And I think what I wanted to come do was, my original vision still stays the same, is I wanted to come give housing. I wanted to give this right of housing to people at a commercial level. So I wanted to make money while doing it. There's this tangible idea of creating infrastructure that is extremely exciting when you build something, when you generate something, when you produce something. And I wanted to feel that. I mean, I spent 3 years in banking, like making financial models for factories and energy plants I never saw, I never owned, I never built, I never designed. Yeah. It was so imaginative. It's like building a technology startup out of a website with lines of code. Yeah. That if somebody says, can you give it to me? You say, like, I can't grab it, It's not physically grabbable. And the world has shifted so much. I mean, at 14, I was making websites and they were paying me for something I couldn't see physically, like out of a screen. So the world has shifted so much to this world of tech that somehow I wanted to go back to my roots, not of my people, but of the humanity. I wanted to be in the physical world. And this is kind of what brought me here and what's kept me here. I've learned to structure myself legally and corporately, which I think is one of the biggest takeaways here. I've learned to fail big time. So I've learned to fail at building, at designing, at winning tenders, at negotiating contracts. Once I've won a contract, I've failed at executing the contract. So I've had to learn from that. I've learned to hire and fire, which is something you mentioned. It's super difficult, man. Like, how do you hire the right people? How do you convince the right people to believe in you?
Yeah.
After they sign the contract, how do you convince them to actually show up the first day of work? I still fail at that. I hired someone the other day. She didn't show up to her first day of work, said the money was not enough. I said, but you signed the contract. I changed my mind. I'm like, well, then you didn't call me. So that's one big thing. I've also been extremely fortunate. Two of my brothers have joined me. We're four brothers. So now it's three of us. And I'm really trying always to inspire them and encourage them to continue seeing my vision. I'm trying to globalize my vision. So, we're doing some work in Zambia, which is a country next door. We're working with two American guys on a fund that they have. They're trying to work in Cameroon. So I've been to Cameroon. I've advised for them formally, and we're trying to start building with them together in Cameroon. So I've got this vision. If you ask me where I see myself in 10 years, which, I've actually never asked myself this, but, bringing it back to the beginning of the conversation, I've got this vision that we're vertically integrated. We're a powerhouse, if you may. Like, why not dream big in the generation, design, construction of homes in innovative ways? Forget innovative materials and this whole buzz. People like to buzz about, oh, look at this innovation in 3D machines. Like, that's not the work. The work is identifying the demand. Right. What do people need? How much can they pay? How do they pay it? How do you bring it to the field? You have no idea how much of my work is actually financial literacy training. Like, that's not my business. But if I cannot teach a teacher, or I cannot teach a nurse that she's not saving enough money every month in her payslip, and she's spending it in cash loans and deductions that go towards purchases of furniture stores or whatever crap she's buying, that she's not able to secure herself an asset. Like, a lot of our work is that. A lot of our work is digitalizations. We have a company that does today digitalizations where we're actually like going into small villages and small towns and digitalizing everything, meaning we interview every teacher, every nurse, every police officer. We absolutely cover the grounds to find out how much money do you make, how many kids do you have, how much money do you spend every month, what do you do for a living, where do you live, how do you live, how do you pay, how much water do you consume, and we make a profile of that person, and we do that for everyone in that town as much as we can. And then we go to the banks and we say, hey, how come you don't have a branch in this town? No, that town is shit. That town doesn't have credit-worthy people. Boom, here's the data. And then they are taken aback and they say, what? How do you have that data? I said, well, we spent $10,000 collecting that data.
Yeah.
So it's not your data, it's our data. So we're not going to give it to you unless we start working together. So we start bringing in partnerships. Another thing we do is we sit down with the municipalities, the villages, the towns, and we say, we want to buy land. Now, picture this. How you show up matters, right? And this is something I learned during my master's. You can't just show up and be like, I want to build houses. Because, you're a German, white, Canadian, right? Like, you, out of all people, would be looked at here like, from the German colonial times of Namibia in the early 1900s, would be looked at here like, good luck, buddy. Your people own all the land. Like, Germans own the majority of the land in Namibia, still today, privately. So walking into a municipality and saying, hey, I want to buy land, doesn't get you anywhere, Nick. But you, with your ethnicity, with your heritage, even if your family was part of the colonial times, which I'm sure they weren't because you would have heard of Namibia before, but I'm sure even if you could still work with people here because it's a peaceful country. There's no regrets. There's no grudges. There's no things of that's a German, that's a this. But how you show up still matters. So what we do, again, I'm a white, Jewish, Latino, Americanized, like I've got nothing to do with Namibia. So how do I walk into a municipality and say, hello, I'm buying land here to build houses? You don't. You work from the grassroots level. And that's what I've developed over the years here with my team, is that we go into the fields and we find the data and we sit down with the village or the town or the municipality. We sit down with the mayor of the town and we say, hey, look, here's a pie chart. Here's how many people own houses. Here's how many people rent houses. Here's how many people crash at someone's house. And unbelievably, I mean, we show them all the other data we collect, but this pie chart is a deal maker for me. Everyone talks about deal breakers. I talk about deal makers. Like, this pie chart is one of the things that opens doors for us, because normally about 5% of people are owning a house from the people we surveyed that are interested in housing. About 45% of people are renting a house. So that makes it 10%. 50%, sorry.
Yeah, 50.
The other 50% are crashing at someone's house.
Wild.
Which means Nick, like it means like I go to Canada, I'm like, hey man, I need a place to stay. And yeah, bro, there's a couch, there's a room, go, no problem. Now, what we show the mayor looks at that chart and he usually goes, okay, man, what are you trying to tell me? Sorry, man, I gotta go. What is this data? You know? And I said, look, this 50% of people that are crashing at someone's house are not renting and don't own. They're crashing at someone's house, which means that they don't pay anything to the person where they're staying. They're crashing. So that means they don't contribute to rates and taxes in your municipality.
Right.
They don't pay garbage collection, water, electricity, but they don't pay taxes on a property. Anyone who's renting or owning is contributing towards that property's existence in this town. So if we take this chart of 100%, right, and we say that half of it contributes, but half of it doesn't, what I'm trying to tell you, Mr. Mayor or Mrs. Mayor, which is the case many times, is that if you and I work together to convert the non-taxpayers to taxpayers, you could double today the budget of your municipality. You could raise the salary of your staff. You could hire better technicians. You could create more services. Whoa, how do we do that? Is usually the response. How do we double my budget? Now we are talking about what matters to him. Who cares what I came here to do?
Yeah.
And then the conversation becomes, holy smokes, we need to give this guy land to build houses as soon as possible because we are going to get rates and taxes from all those houses. And then I usually take my phone in the middle of the thing and I say, look, man, here's my calculator. How much money do you put in rates and taxes? And then we say, let's say 300 Namibian dollars. 300 Namibian dollars is somewhere close to like 30 Canadian dollars. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
So 300 Namibian dollars per month times 12 months, it's 3,600 Namibian dollars. Take a zero of 360 Canadian a year. That's how much one property is. Now, I usually tell him, here's my list of 1,000 people we registered. He can see it, he can go through it, he can audit it.
Yeah.
Then I say 500 of those are crashing. If we converted all 500 to either renters or owners, because we find a way to put that project through. And that's usually like a very unreachable goal, right? Like 500 people is a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
So I say 3,600 times 500 people means now 1,800,000 Namibian dollars every year more for your municipality. And all you need to do is enable me.
Exactly.
Let's work together.
Yes.
Let me service land. Let me find out what the demand is. Let me identify home. Let me give these people mortgages through the banks. And usually we get 30 plots to build, not 500, or we get 50, or we don't get anything. But this is the conversation starter, because what is in their mind at the end of the day is this number, 1.8, where they're saying, holy smokes, 180,000 Canadian dollars more per year. I can buy 4 more vehicles and hire 2 people to clean services. I mean, 180,000 goes a long way in this market.
For
right?
sure.
You could hire a new engineer for the municipality, or 2 or 3, and you could buy a few vehicles to provide better services, or you could use that money to install better water pumps to extend your services to more houses.
Yeah.
So it's just to show you that like there's an approach and a way, and I think a lot of what our time has been here in Namibia is let's continue finding approaches and ways to conduct our business, which is build houses. All of what I've said is about housing, but we also build schools and we also build clinics.
Yeah.
We work with an NGO on the ground called the Pupkewitz Foundation, which is the charitable arm of a big corporate. We work with a New York NGO, 2 of them, one called Kifo and another one called the Palms for Life Fund. Actually, they partner on projects, and we usually what we do is we identify communities where there is a lack of infrastructure, there is a lack of educational infrastructure, health infrastructure, and we go in there and we build the infrastructure, but with the community from an inside perspective.
Right.
We generate jobs, we ask them what they need, we work together to identify what they need, and we build it. And recently we've been digitalizing through Operfin. Operfin is the company that gives that digitalizes the home loans.
Right.
I mean, everything here is paper-based, man. You want to apply for a mortgage, you fill it out, an application, you submit it. So we've tried to digitalize the process. I keep telling myself I'm going to turn this into a fintech that actually gives loans. So far, it's a fintech that helps process the loans. But now I want to give loans. So I'm trying to raise money from the World Bank. We're actively talking to them. We could share that on another maybe session.
Wow. That'd be
It's
so
very
interesting.
difficult. It's a
Oh,
very difficult conversation because they say you're not big enough for us to trust you to give money, but you're innovative enough where we want to give it to you. So why don't you partner with a bank to do it? So I'm like, it's a chicken and the egg. We're like, do you need to be rich to borrow money? But if you're poor, you're not trustworthy enough. So go talk to the big banks. So I'm fighting the fight. I'm hustling to try to put it through. And then recently we started a company called Jabu. I think our website is gojabu.com, Gojabu. And what we're trying to do is distribute food in the
yes.
informal sector.
That was so
So
cool.
I think,
Look into that a little bit. That was so interesting to me that that specifically was wild.
look, man, 50% of the population in the capital lives in the informal sector. Most of our employees come from the informal sector, people making 300 Canadian dollars a month, 400, 500, 700. But, we're not employing bricklayers. Here, a bricklayer usually makes more money in our company. A bricklayer in other companies make, I don't know, under $7 a day,
Wow.
under $5 a day. And the minimum wage is crazy. It's around there. And if we discuss Venezuela, people make $5 a month. So you have to contextualize it based on where you are.
Right.
But I think one of the amazing things we discovered in a negative way that allowed us to kind of come up with this idea is that it's amazing is not always positive. It's amazing because it amazes you. It leaves you stunned. And it amazed me that informal shops, which are supermarkets made out of laminated zinc, out of like informal materials, actually are operating usually from a small entrepreneur. They're SMEs, they're small businesses. The guy needs to wake up early, or the woman. They drive to the city in a taxi, pay a couple US dollars on the taxi. They finally get there. They spend 3 hours shopping. They come back in a taxi, and then they finally open their shop, and now they are selling. So if you try to think about democratizing the price of food, these shops who sell to the poorest people sell food at the highest price.
Right.
It's crazy. Like if there was a court of law, you would say it's illegal, but you can't. There's not a court of law on pricing. But why is that? It's because markets are inefficient for the informal sector. And if we allow that to continue, which is it's the same tenant that brought me here to build housing. If we allow it to continue that we cannot create affordable products and we cannot give affordable food and affordable housing and we cannot give a better life, misery will prolong itself.
Yes.
A can of corned beef, which is a common product, or a tin of fish in the supermarket can cost you 18 Namibian dollars, 1.8 Canadian dollars. Okay?
Right.
If you go to the informal sector and you walk into a shop, it costs you 2.5 Canadian dollars. Why the heck do I need to pay 40% more if I'm poorer than the people in the city? And that's because the guy who buys it and sells it to me buys it at 18 already in the city and takes transport to go there and puts his time in so it's not unfair, it's just inefficient. So what we've identified is today we had a meeting, we've hit our 1,000 businesses mark. We've digitalized 1,000 businesses in the capital. We know exactly where they are geolocated on a map. We know what they sell. We have pictures of their shop. We've mapped it. We've now created like a Google map internal with everyone's pin on the map. We know the heat map of where everyone is and what they sell and what their type of shop is. We've now rented a warehouse. We're launching this venture on the side. Like, I don't know if I have enough hours in the day for some of the things I'm doing, but it's a new business. We've hired about 17 people for it. And what we're trying to pilot, kicking off officially August 1st, is can we actually now efficiently distribute food that we buy from the manufacturers at the same prices that these supermarkets are buying and selling to the informal sector at a price that is still low enough that they can compete even price-wise with the big supermarkets in the center of town. Right. And I think if we can do that, we're doing a few things. We're democratizing the price of food. We're bringing prices of food down in the places where it matters most.
Where it's needed.
We're generating more time in the hands of these small entrepreneurs to continue operating their shops, because now they don't have to travel to the city. They can just continue being in the informal sector selling.
Right.
And the third one is we can drive the upgrading of informal settlements, which brings us back to our initial concept of, wanting to give housing and creating habitats, which is, we've got all these people who have informal shops. If their livelihoods can be improved and we can create more efficient markets, hopefully their shops can also be formalized in the long run.
Yes.
And no pressure, no commitment, but can we add value to this? Yes. And this is something we're going to be raising money for. This is something we're piloting. This is something we're hiring for. If somebody from abroad likes this idea, thinks it's genius, they want to join us and be part of the team, we'll hire them. Look, we're at that stage where we believe in it. We've had all the cards on the table. We've done all the market research, and we're piloting this project to launch it to make it work.
And
you
if
can call it a startup.
Yeah, and if people do want to help out, or whether it's an expertise or actual hands-on help, or if that's something that resonates with them, well, how would they best get in touch with you, David, to offer that help or resources?
Yeah, I'm sure. Look, my name, I'm sure will come up in the episode. So yeah. I'm sure you can Facebook me. My message might go to the on one message. You can reach out to me. I have an easy email, which is david@akinin.com. So my first name and my last name.com. So if somebody just sees my name, they can email me. They can LinkedIn me, Instagram. Pretty open. Usually I don't answer if I don't know you. So I ask you, do I know you? Because I'm trying to find out what's up, Yeah. There's a lot of phishing and random things on the internet. But if there's a sincere message coming my way, and I'm an open book. If I'm busy, I'm busy. And when I have time, I'll make time. And, there's nothing bad about communication. And it goes the other way around. You were suggesting that about reaching out to help us. But in any ways, if there is a way that somebody needs help and they think that I may be adequate or I may be able to add value in some way, and after this conversation, they want to explore one of the topics. I just had a call with a high school girl who's 15, 16, who heard me talk on a webinar the other day for her high school, reached out to me on Instagram, asked me if I could give her 30 minutes to explore an idea she's pursuing and give her some ideas around it. We ended up spending an hour on the phone on Sunday. Wow. I loved it. And it doesn't happen enough, and she was like, I appreciate it so much. Thank you so much. I said, please stop thanking me. This is a nice conversation, one-on-one,
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed it. And I hope she calls back again, because I want to know what she's up to. And when I was her age, I was looking for mentors. I didn't know what mentors were. And I think when anyone ever is planning something and you actually think I wish that person could give me feedback, just reach out. And I've discovered in my life, when you reach out, you get an answer. And usually the answer is positive. When the answer is negative, you move on. What did you say? 8 billion people in the world. Forget it. Go on.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to leave everyone with one thought. What really stuck with me was saying how important it was for you to find that one pie chart that really got your point across of how can we get 50% of people to start contributing. I think what that said to me was, what is my pie chart that I need to find to make that switch of people starting to get themselves out of whatever funk they're in and start to chase their dreams. What pie chart is that for me? And I think that's a great goal that's going to really educate maybe my next couple 10 or 15 podcasts maybe towards that goal right now, because I think that's just how I want to treat this, is finding interesting people that can set me along new paths of interest and just go from there and bounce as I learn and get better at this, and use that to hopefully spread some good, just like you're doing. And I can't thank you enough for being on. I know this is a long time to sit down, and I can't thank you enough for all the time. I know you've got a very busy schedule, so I really appreciate it. And thank you so much. I can't wait to have you on again if you're ever willing.
No, Nick, please, man. This was excellent. The conversation was mutually appreciated. So I really wish you luck with the podcast. I've heard a few of the episodes. I've gotten through parts of them on some occasions, and others I've actually finished. So I'm actually excited about it. And thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you. I'll definitely be reaching out to you again and trying to get you on as soon as possible. So I might be seeing you sooner than you think.
Cool. Amazing.
All right. Thanks. See you later. All right. Thank you guys so much for listening to that one. Like I said, I was really proud of what we accomplished with this podcast, and I'm hoping that this can maybe be a jumping off point to show people that I can bring on guests that I don't know and really still knock it out of the park like I know I can. Just wanted to take this opportunity for the people that listen to the whole episode. I know it's a long one. If you stuck around this long, maybe I can put the little bug in your ear. I'm looking for help on this podcast. I want to find the right person, but if you could just start keeping in mind, if you know somebody that's maybe looking to change course and try something different, there's plenty of different avenues. If somebody wanted to learn iMovie and help me edit together the audio back to the video components of these podcasts I'm doing, and start putting out some clips on Instagram or on YouTube so people can have a visual component to the podcast. That would be awesome. If people wanted to help me out as they're listening through the podcast to find points that were maybe little rants or pieces of conversation that we could cut into clips of 2 minutes to 20 minutes long, and start putting some of those out as well for just marketing materials. That'd be hugely helpful. A million different things helping me keep track of the different things I talk about on the podcast, and making sure I'm linking them in my Twitter, and allowing people to use this podcast more as a tool. So if I hear of cool podcasts that I learned a lot from, I can kind of pass it on to you guys, because I do think it's very important to always be learning. And I think podcasts and that sort of thing are just a huge resource that we're really not taking advantage of. And I just have a certain skill set that I've used over the years to parse through these podcasts, just because I've listened to so many and know when there's something worth your while out there. And I think if people start to hear what I have to say and trust my recommendations, it can really go a long way, and people can learn a lot from the places that I've learned all this. If you're wondering where I'm getting a lot of this from, I'm full transparency about where these ideas are coming from for a lot of it. I mean, a lot of it comes from my brain, but a lot of it is just listening to really smart people a lot of the time, and anybody has that opportunity. It's just about the time you want to put in listening. So yeah, if anybody wants to get in contact with me, it could be just even a little bit, just even if you want to do it on the side of just kind of keeping your ear out as you're listening through. If you're enjoying it anyways and you want to help out, that'd be awesome. Or if you wanted to jump on in more of a permanent position, it could also be someone that hops on the podcast with me and listens to the conversation. And if they want to input, they could input, or they could just help and Google things when we get to points where we don't know what's or we want something double checked or fact checked. You could hop in there, or if you could kind of treat it however you want. I just wanted to maybe get that message out there of that'd be something I'm looking for, and just see what the universe comes. It seems like this whole process has been just a matter of putting things out there and seeing what comes back, and things are just falling into place. So I thought, why not just take a crack at this and throw it out there and just see kind of what washes up to shore. So like I said, if you guys could do me a huge solid and follow the Instagram and Twitter accounts for the VonDubCast, that goes a huge way for building a platform to grow this podcast. And yeah, thank you guys so much for just allowing me to do this and coming back to listen every week, and sometimes twice a week here. So yeah, thanks guys, and I can't wait for the next one. I can't wait to keep getting better for you guys. Thank you.